I'm not saying that it has all these medicinal benefits, but science is saying it has certain medicinal benefits, and personal anecdotal experience, I've seen it with that particular person. My own experiences, my own experiences with it are tainted because of my extreme heavy use for such a prolonged period of time. So I would not say that like I'm a case study in like medicinal marijuana and symptom clusters because I've just been smoking my entire life.
But there are tons of studies out there that show that medicinal, like, or marijuana as a substance has medicinal qualities, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like there is use to the plant. I think that that's just what I've noticed too, is just like, how are you using it? You know, very often some people are using it for medicinal purpose, but then other people are just blazing every day saying, oh, I got glaucoma.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
What is up, internet, and welcome to another episode of Three Averagely Intelligent Dudes discussing dangerous ideas. And today we'll be talking a little bit about the marijuana industry and cannabis.
Cannabis, as I like to call it.
As you like to call it. The other day, John was trying to settle on what the actual term he wanted to use for it was, because it's the plant with a million names.
I prefer Dank. I just call it Dank.
Dude,
I realized watching a bunch of documentaries that Nixon spelled it with an H. Well, I'm not saying like Nixon, but like American like politics spelled it with an H back then. Marijuana with an H.
Yeah,
so
they
instead
just
of a
saw
J, it was H. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't like the idea of having a J making an H sound, so they just changed it.
Yeah, that was very Mexican at the time.
That's a really low-key racist move right there. They were really.
You want to talk about low-key racism? We'll get into that.
Well, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into why it does have a J sounding H to it as well, and how it kind of came to the United States. That's something I'm gonna talk about. But yeah. So, anyways, the plant of a million names. You said Dank. It's so funny. I was on set the other day for a Kasky shoot, and I had the CBD joints, and then somebody's like, "Yo, let me hit that," and then I was like, "All right, it's CBD," and they're like, "Oh, fuck that," this and that, and they were like, "CBD stands for can't be dank," and I was like, I mean, it's kind of the whole point. But
yeah, I mean, that's like, oh, that's O'Doul's, like that can't get me drunk. Like, obviously, that's the entire purpose of it.
Full steez of it, but nonetheless, they were trying to look down on me a little bit because I've kind of pulled back from smoking weed, so that's kind of been my thing with it. But all of us here at the table do have quite an extensive experience with marijuana, I would say. Knowledge,
history. I think we're all very well versed on
I used to
areas.
make it. No.
You did, though. I totally forget about that. I always forget about that. People ask me questions all the time, though. They're like, "Yo, do you think your brother knows something about this and that?" And I'm like, I mean, I'll ask him. He know quite a bit about fucking cooking that shit up.
I did up until like a certain year, and then after that, I totally fell out of the science and the progression of cannabis and extracts and stuff. But I was very well versed up until about 2015, and then post 2015, I don't know anything about it.
So let's just open up with that then. Let's just all kind of lay out our marijuana resumes.
Extensive.
I would call it a rap sheet.
Yeah.
Cause I got quite a few. I actually do have some charges.
I actually do have a rap sheet for that.
Yeah, you've both been charged with marijuana charges?
I have been charged with simple possession, and I did, I want to say 20-something hours of community service, maybe more. I don't remember the exact hours, but I can tell you all about what I did. I don't know how long I was out there mowing in a wife beater, but let me tell you, that A-shirt tan didn't leave my body for almost 2 years.
It's intense.
Yeah, I never actually got caught with marijuana or anything.
Really?
No, never. Well,
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure you've told me a story I don't remember about me getting you busted.
Both of you have almost gotten me caught with marijuana. Oh, we did get caught. Me and Matt got caught when we were on tour, and we were driving through Oklahoma. We got pulled over, and this dude found all our weed. So I'm going to tell this story so funny because we get pulled over in Oklahoma.
Wait, you're on tour for Mod Sun?
Yeah, we're doing Mod Sun's tour. It's the BB tour, and we're
actually on our way home.
We're on our way home. The tour is over, and it ended on the East Coast, and so we're trekking all the way back to California. And we're driving through Oklahoma, and now we have about an ounce on us, maybe, I guess.
Less.
A little less.
We have quite a bit of paraphernalia.
But tons of stuff, because we've been on tour for months now. So
with a man who is known for his recreational marijuana use, from what I understand.
Very much so. We got pipes, we got bongs, we got papers, we got weed, we
Uppers, downers.
we got extracts on us, like we got that. I mean, the whole nine. And we're keeping it, most of it, like we got a lot of stuff in the trailer, but then we're driving a truck, truck that pulls this RV trailer. And so we have this little like pouch. Everybody's got their little,
like an airtight
their
container.
little bag.
Everybody's got their suitcase of marijuana things. My current one is a Tupperware that's like a Christmas themed Tupperware. That's my current.
When I was in high school, which was when I was like caught with weed and actually got not charged because I was a minor, but I got in trouble and I had to do community service. I had a fanny pack that kept all of my stuff, and we referred to it as the party pouch.
I like that.
Yeah, ours was an airtight container, and in there we just had this like little bag. It's like a hemp kind of bag, actually, honestly. And anyways, it was in our center console. We weren't really trying to be slick or nothing. Anyways, we get pulled over in Oklahoma. For some reason, Mac always gets pulled over. I'm not the guy that gets pulled over. It's Mac. I'm asleep, and Mac's like, "Hey, we're getting pulled over," and I'm like, "Oh shit." So then the guy comes up and he starts talking to us and ask us some questions. I can't remember what he's saying. I remember then he proceeds to try and separate us, right? So he's like, "Yo,"
he succeeds in doing so.
Well, he succeeds, right? So
There
he's
really
like,
wasn't anything we could do about it.
No. Divide and conquer,
baby.
100%. So he's like, "Hey, can you come with me?" So he puts me in the car, right? And he's like, "I'm gonna go talk to your brother real quick, and then I'll be right back." And this and that. And I'm like, "All right, fine." So I'm sitting I wasn't even sitting in the back. I'm sitting in the passenger seat of the cop car, I believe. Maybe I was in the back, but I'm sitting there and I'm just like, "God, you better not fucking say anything." I was like, "You gotta keep his fucking mouth shut."
He said, "This snitch ass motherfucker."
Dude, I already had experiences with you. Okay, so
I don't
I'm just
remember this.
thinking,
Let me go ahead and just
One
make the
story
quick
at a time.
point.
Absolve
One
you,
story
baby.
at a
One story at a
time.
time.
I'm not gonna try. I'm just saying I don't remember that one, and I'm
So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. I'm just sitting there thinking, "Oh my goddamn." So then finally, he's talking to my brother for a while and this and that, and he comes back to the car and then he's like, "All right, well, Mr. Sloan, your brother already told me that there's weed in the car, so and I'm like, "God damn it." I'm screaming. And I'm like, he's like, "So, we're going to search you and this and that, blah, blah." And I'm like, "All right, fine, whatever." So I go over there and he searches the car and he's like, "Where's it at?" And we're just like, "It's in there." We already know by now. So he pulls it out and he's like looking through it all and he sees all this stuff. And I'm just thinking like, damn, this is not going to be good. You know what I mean? And I mean, to keep a long story short, he's just like, "All right, well, I'm going to take this stuff with me because you guys are going to get, busted." He's like, "Somebody might catch you again."
He tried to pull the "I'm a good Samaritan" cop and was like, "I can't let you keep it in good faith because if you get pulled over again, the next guy might not be so nice."
Yeah.
And I was like,
"But I'm going to let you go with a warning."
I would have been like, "Hey, you two gentlemen, roll up a nice big fat reefer right here. Go ahead and smoke as much as you can. I'm gonna have to take it."
You would at least let us. Yeah, so he stole all our weed, essentially. He just stole our weed off us. And then he let us go. He didn't write us a ticket, did nothing. It's not legal in Oklahoma.
Yeah, you got mugged.
It pretty much got mugged by the cops for our weed. But I guess he explained later he thought that we were like
trafficking. He said the reason that he pulled us over was because what did he say?
Our rear tire was,
our spare tire was sitting lower underneath our car than normal, and I was like, for a 2004 Ford Expedition, Eddie Bauer edition. Like,
how did you
know that?
How could you even see that with our trailer?
He said that. Yeah, he said that we didn't have the trailer.
Oh, that's right. We had lost the trailer. Yeah, you're right.
There's a couple of details.
Long story.
Anyways, yeah. So he said that it was because of that he pulled us over, stating that that's where drug traffickers like to hide a lot of contraband or whatever.
Yeah,
it's probably bullshit.
I imagine so. But either way, so he let us go. He was just like, "All right, well, I'm taking
if he was pulling us over to steal weed, he certainly pointed us out very well. I don't know if he just happened to be like, "Oh, cool, I scored big for myself because they weren't actually trafficking or what," but he just took the weed and left.
Yeah.
Now, in my defense, because you weren't there for the conversation, the choices between these two, like your big point is like, make them do their job, you pay your tax money and everything, and I was like, yeah, but in my mind the choices were between getting our car impounded, which was not registered or anything like that. It's not legal at all, so
I think
he
it
let
was
us
at
off.
the time.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, either way, he let us off with quite a big crime in the state of Oklahoma, and the only other option that I could see was him finding the stuff without our compliance and then taking us to jail, impounding our car, and us having to stay in jail until we go to court in Oklahoma, which I didn't really feel like doing, considering the fact that we had just come off of a 2-month long tour on the way home. And so I was like, yeah, If the options were you take my weed from me and let us go, or I have to go to court and still get my weed taken away, I took the former.
Okay, now here's my counterpoint to that. Neither one of those were options. Those were the options you perceived to be the case, right? It's not
and
like
I was correct.
Maybe
And was
not.
I or was I not correct?
Okay, you're assuming that he let us go because you were truthful, which he did not say. You know what I mean? Like, you're just making that assumption.
But he did let us go.
He did let us go, right? My point being is, this is just law. If that cop decided he wanted to be a jackass, right? Because some cops will do that. They'll say, hey, tell me the truth, buddy. I got your back.
Oh, yeah. They
Don't
can just
worry.
lie to you.
yeah.
I'm going to take care of you.
I'm well aware of the
And then you tell them the truth, and then he
lying by
fucks
cops.
you up the ass with a big one, right? If that had happened, and
What
then
if,
we
but
did,
he couldn't have fucked me up the ass any more than if we
Can I
had
make the
not
point?
complied.
Can I make my point? I'll let you talk about how you saw it. If we had not said yes, we would have actually had a case in court if we did end up in court. Because you gave him the right to search our vehicle, once you say, yeah, sure, we have no legal standing whatsoever. Like you said, it was skeptical
I
that
actually
he pulled us.
didn't give him the right to search the vehicle. I just told him that we had weed. He went back and told you, we're going to search the
probable
car.
cause.
And you said,
But
okay.
that's
baited
probable
me.
cause.
But either way.
Yeah.
Either
I
way,
didn't still
admitting
give
to it.
consent.
It gives him probable cause, all that
Yeah,
stuff. It
he can
gives
search
him
with
ability
probable
to.
cause.
Which before that, like you said, his probable cause was your tire looked a little low on the backside,
Which could have
would have been a lot
illegal
harder.
search and seizure.
It would have
Yeah,
been
it
a
could
lot
have.
harder to prove in court. And look, don't listen to this schmuck, guys. I'm just for you guys, honestly. Like, legally, you have more moral ground or more grounds to stand on in court, not morally, but more grounds to stand on in court if you do not give people the right to look into your home. Don't let the cops in your house. Don't let them look through your car. If they find something, you just at least have more wiggle room than if you're like, sure, man, whatever they find or plant. Don't even get me started, right? They might just plant some shit on anything. You don't really have much.
But assess your options. You know, I'm listening to this story
back
here,
then.
and you guys are talking about your different options. And I've been pulled over with you a few times. I don't remember the one about narking you out over weed, but who knows? I smoke a lot of this cannabis, and it affects the memory. But I do remember the other times I've been pulled over with you, and the time that I got busted for weed.
Convenient.
And when I got busted, good point. But still, my truth is valid.
Sure.
When I got pulled over and I got charged with simple possession, I chose to be honest because of how obvious it was that I had just smoked weed in my car. Me and my friend were in my car. There, it is illegal in North Carolina, where we are at the time, and at neither one of our dwellings were we allowed to just willy-nilly smoke illegal herbs. So we would go hang out in the car, smoke a little weed, you know, going to get some snacks at the convenience store or something. I don't remember exactly, but this cop gets behind me. Now, he has reason to pull me over. His probable cause is that he said I had failed to miss a court date. That court date was from when me and you got pulled over about 6 months earlier than this, when you were on mid-tour from your second tour of Iraq with the Army. We had a joint of not even weed. It was the fake stuff that's still, like, it was legal at the time. So spice or something like that. Whatever what it was. Whatever what it was. It was
the
legal.
fake plant of many names.
Me and you got pulled over, and this cop gave us a warning.
Yeah.
In that
don't
warning,
remember that.
yeah, I do.
There's a lot of not remembering going around between you two.
A lot of weed smoking too. In that warning, which he gave me a little piece of paper too, and he was like, "This is just a warning." Blah blah blah. He had a ticket in there, and I didn't look. I'm not even
Fake
shitting
warning.
you. This motherfucker hit me with the old Husker Du, the old shell game,
warning ticket.
and got me with the warning ticket. Now I don't know that I missed this court date. So when this cop gets behind me in Mooresville, he runs my tags and says, "This guy's got a warrant out for his arrest." So he pulls me over. My car, I literally called my car the Bluntmobile. So this Jeep Patriot stank of marijuana. I didn't have much on me. I ended up having like 2 grams or something on me, and that was it, and like a pipe. But me and my friend get pulled over, and I'm like, "Yo, we about to go to jail." Like, I just knew immediately, because like I'm high as shit.
It's North Carolina.
The car's stinking. It's North Carolina. Motherfucker pulls me over. White cop and a black cop. He comes up. I roll my window down, and he's like, "So you want to give me the weed now? Or do you want me to arrest you and just go ahead and put you in the car and then go in here and find it?" And I was like, "I'll be honest with you. I just smoked marijuana." And he was like, "I know." I was like, "I'm sure you do. It's very evident." And turns out, I got simple possession, because I went to the jail, went in front of the magistrate.
Could have got a DUI.
Yeah, could have. But the person that was with me did not admit to smoking weed, so they were able to just play sober and then drive my car home, and that was as far as they took the under the influence thing.
Yeah, and I think that the big point that you were making as far as like assess your options is that Rod wasn't there for the conversation between me and the cop, and so to him he just has this idea of what the cop is like, somebody that might plant something in your car or whatever. But I like to think that I'm a fairly good judge of character. I've been wrong on a few occasions, but I've been right more than I have been wrong, and on this occasion I was correct in assuming that he was not a dick cop, because not all cops are dicks. Actually, in my experience, not most of the cops I've ever talked to were not dicks. And I was like, hey, look, man, we got some weed right here. We're from California and everything. And he was like, all right, for sure. I appreciate you and whatnot. And, you know, in the end, he stole our weed from us, which was unfortunate. But I still think that I came off way better than if I had been like, nah, bro, don't got nothing. And then he was like, what's this? Well, you know, I just wanted to make you do your job. And then he could be like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that I do my job and get you for every little thing that I can in court. So you're right. Maybe we would have had a case on the weed, but the validity of our registration and stuff was in question. So there's a lot of stuff that could have gone into that.
I just look, same thing stands. Like, you know what I mean?
I had more information
I've watched
there.
So many motherfuckers interrogation rooms fall for that ploy right there, where they're just like
murder interrogations,
just all types. Where like that's literally a tactic of police. Like they will tell you it's in their books, where they will sit there and they will try to come off and appeal to you that they're here to help you, or that they want what's best for you.
That's how they got
or
Michael
that
Flynn.
They're good guys. Like you can trust me. All that shit, and then your ass is going to prison for 25 years or something on some dumb shit anyway. So I feel you. You can judge a character all day, but that judge a character don't stand up in court. And I trust the law like more than I trust just random police.
I've denied the police a search on multiple occasions, on one of which I did have marijuana in my car and was high. I had smoked a blunt in my Mazda Miata on my way to work that day, and I had a Rocho about this big in my little ashtray. That motherfucker pulled me over, probably because I'm driving a Miata, I got long hair and tattoos, and I look like a poor person because my car's a piece of shit. So he's thinking, you know, let me get this guy, because he didn't have any reason to pull me over. When he pulled me over, he was just like, you know, so he said something about my car was sitting too low. And I'm like, it's a Mazda Miata, my man. It sits very low.
They come stock like this.
But when he checked my papers were some bullshit. He was going to write me what we call in North Carolina fix-it ticket about my insurance or my inspection, whatever it was. And then he's like, I would feel very comfortable if I could search your car. No, what he said was, I'd like you to step out of the car. I'd like to search your car. And I was like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I want to search. I said, do you have probable cause?
Yeah.
And he said, it would make me feel more comfortable. And I said, I would feel very uncomfortable stepping out of this car, considering you have 3 other cop cars behind me. It looks like to be about 7 people with handguns.
I would feel very uncomfortable.
And I am not playing this up for humor. I am remembering this to the best of my memory. And then I literally then told that man, it is 10:43. Little Caesars closes in 17 minutes, and I have to be at a bonfire.
Yeah.
I have to go, sir. I'm sorry, but maybe next time.
Right. Yeah.
And he was just like, have a good day.
Exactly.
I didn't 100% know my rights, but I was going off of instinct. And it felt fucking fishy, bro. He was just like, I'd feel more comfortable.
100%. That's how they play you all the time, because people don't know their rights, you know, and people don't even know that they can say no to these things, you know? Like you get like same thing, if a cop just stops you and says, let me see your ID, fuck you. Like, fuck out of here. Like, what do you mean see my ID for what? Like what reason?
Why do you have to know
like,
who I am?
They have to ask you, they have to give you reasons why they're detaining you. They have to give you reasons why they want to search your car and all that stuff. And if they choose to, I mean, then they'll choose to. I mean, they can do it. Even if you say no, they can still do it. It's not like I said no.
I mean, when you get down to the basis of it, it's a man with a firearm, and unless you have a firearm and are prepared to use it, they're gonna do whatever they want.
Yeah, they're gonna do it.
My mind just jumps. At least if you say no, like, I thought this was America. Like, getting drug off of the benches,
right? But that's the first thing your lawyer's gonna ask you, and you get sit down and say, "Did you tell him that you could search your car?" Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to tell you that I'm not gonna take this case.
Yeah. So
you're gonna have to find different representation.
I digress. The same thing happened with you when we got pulled over. They separated
Allegedly.
me from him, and then they put me in the car, and then I come back, and he was like they searched the car. I don't know if they found anything, but I just remember you being like, they said they were gonna get the dogs, man. They said I was like I don't, and that's why I created the whole joke about I was like, your money's paid for those
then
goddamn
make them
dogs.
get the dogs.
I was like, you make them get the goddamn dogs. I was like, don't let them threaten you.
you call that motherfucker out here? Waste his time.
In the edit, I'm gonna put one of those disclaimers they put under Trump's tweets that says this is disputed information.
No, what we should do is over this entire thing, we should just put that this is not legal advice because it's not legal
it's
advice.
Not legal advice. Yes.
Because you kind of pointed, you were like, for you, the listener, let me tell you what to do. Don't listen to him. This is not legal advice.
Research yourself.
Do your own research.
Oh yeah, I'm a big
Get your own lawyer.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say that I've had the most success with police doing the Good Samaritan bit. Mm-hmm. I once was pulled over on some very sketchy, on my own account, sketchy grounds. Like I was doing some sketchy shit because we had just smoked in my car. It's me and 4 other motherfuckers in my car. We all have weed, personal weed, there's group weed, like there's weed that we had bought together. We all each have our own stash of weed. And we were on our way to our homie's house filled with underage minors drinking. Yeah. We're driving through the neighborhood, and as I'm pulling into my homie's neighborhood, I notice that there's a cop on the street. This is a very bad neighborhood, so there's lots of cops. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to the gas station first, or what did I say? Okay, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go around the block first, like circle around the other side of the street, so that way the cop doesn't see us pull up at the house. And so we do that. We do that. Cop does the exact same thing. So now we pass by him again. And I was like, oh, that backfired. That wasn't a good thing. So then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to squeeze into this gas station. I'm going to pick up some snacks and some blunt wraps or whatever. So I go into the gas station. I'm taking my time. You know, I'm thinking like the cop's going to drive around for a while and then he'll drive away. And so we're doing that.
Watching him at the gas station.
We come out of the gas station and I'm literally pulling up to the house and the cop comes behind me and he pulls me over. And so if this is the house, this is me on the other side of the street being pulled over. There's literally people in my friend's front yard. Luckily, he didn't have any like porch lights or anything, and so it's dark. But there's literally minors holding alcoholic beverages 13 feet away from this cop. My homie in the back, he immediately pulls out his cigarette pack that has a joint in it. He swallows his joint and then puts a cigarette in his mouth to cover the motion. Sure enough, the cop comes up to his window first, the back passenger window, with his hand on his gun, flashlight beaming in his face. And my homie's just sitting there like, what's up, dude? And so he was like, I just saw you moving around. He was like, I'm smoking a cigarette. So then he comes to my window. And I've got my shit ready to go. Insurance is paid up. Got, valid driver's license and shit.
He said, test me, motherfucker.
How you doing, officer? And he was like, I'm doing well, thank you. You boys, what are you guys up to? And I was like, well, we all just got off of work and we're just coming over to a friend's house to hang out, just chill until we all have to go to school tomorrow. And he was like, okay. He was like, well, the reason I pulled you over is because this is a heavy drug and weapons trafficking area. And I looked around and I was like, well, we definitely don't have any of that. And he was like, okay. And, I can't remember the exact nuances of the conversation, but basically I just hit him with the Good Samaritan. Like, there's nothing to see here. Mm-hmm. We're upstanding gentlemen.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
And he was like, all right, cool. And then he left. Little did he know that the largest marijuana dealer with very many guns that were unverified were literally right across the street from him. Like, his back was facing these people. And so as we get into the party, everybody was like, yo, what the fuck? What was going on? And I was like, nothing. I hit him with the Good Samaritan. It's all good. Works every time.
I want to make this caveat too. My counterpoint is not that you should be a dick to the cops.
Let me clarify. He's being very dickish here.
You should hit him with the Good Samaritan.
But know your rights.
And also say no.
Yeah, but know your rights. Because that's
politely to say,
in my story, that's exactly what I did.
CC's closing at 11,
yeah,
sir.
Exactly.
And I would really like to be on my way,
said
please.
That
if I don't bring this pizza, they're going to be very upset at me.
Yes, I literally said that.
You don't pull up on him like, fuck you, bitch, you fucking pig. You don't know I know my rights.
There is a time and a place to shit talk the police. I've done that too. I told him
behind their back.
No, I told him, man, he had the cops show up at my mama's house one town over at 11:15 at night looking for me on some papers bullshit that this cop had fucked up a ticket. And so when my mama called me freaking the fuck out, why are there 2 Mooresville police officers in my driveway looking for you? And I looked at the time and it was 11 o'clock. I said, Mama, let me call you right back. I called Statesville Police Department. I said, is anybody looking for John Allen? And he said, oh yeah, officer such and such. I said, could you patch me through? Man, my man comes up on the phone. He's like, this is officer such and such. I said, this is John Allen. Did you send 2 Mooresville police officers to my mother's house looking for me in Mooresville? You know I have a valid address in Statesville and it's on file. I believe you gave me a ticket and I gave you that address. And he was like, well, the ticket was, and it's something that happened where he just misplaced the ticket, but I had already paid it, but he couldn't bring in his half, something like that. But basically, I was fucking steaming. And this man said, I was actually on my way to your house. I said, I'm on my front porch right now smoking a cigarette if you want to come, what did I say, hash this out? And he was like, there'll be no need for that.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called white privilege.
That's right.
So
How did he know you was white?
He did. I mean,
I was
who
just
knows?
making a joke that
But-
black people don't get the right to talk shit to the police ever. But
I was on the phone.
He was on the phone.
Yeah, I mean.
That helps.
But basically,
That helps.
the point of the story is there is a time and a place to tell these motherfuckers, hey,
and
I
it's
know
when
what
they're
the
not
fuck-
in your face,
Yeah.
like you said, on
Right,
the
when you're on the phone.
or when they're not looking at you, or before he walks up
All
to your
of those
car.
sound-
Podcast,
All of those
various
sounds
different
like
forms.
the time and place. All of those sound like the time
When
and
he's
place.
looking at you with his gun, hands on his gun, that's when you shut the fuck up and do what you're told.
When he's standing at attention outside of a courthouse and you're with 700 other individuals holding signs, that's also a good time to tell them
That's
the truth.
a good time. Yeah, you
No,
got
it's
to.
not. Because you might not be the guy that gets cracked in the dome piece with a riot shield, but somebody does sometimes.
And tear gas sucks.
And tear gas sucks. Yeah, you shouldn't be in one of those crowds anyway.
I prefer to talk shit about them when they're not
when
around.
they're not there, like
That's
I do
me.
with most people.
I will say this. All of our instances we just described were non-violent drug-related offenses.
Yeah,
we are not
100%.
violent criminals.
100%.
But in every dealing I've had with the police when it comes to marijuana, they've been I would say every one of mine, they've been lenient.
Yeah. No, they have. And like I told you, this was Oklahoma where we got pulled over, and they're not even legalized or anything like that. So I was just like, wow, I mean, it's definitely laxed up a lot, in a sense. I always wondered what happens in California and stuff now where, you're legally allowed to possess like up to 2 ounces. So I don't even know how that conversation goes anymore or whatever. But I'll tell you this too about, being in California was a different experience. We grew up in Texas, so I've been pot smoking my whole life. I mean, pretty much since I was like 9th grade, I think, or no, my senior year actually. So, but high school, it was the summer between my junior and senior years when I first smoked pot for like the first time, and then from there on, I pretty much was just smoking weed every.
Yeah, it got
single
really
day.
cool after that.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And then I just was.
Yeah, it just made me so fucking cool.
And I just was able. Accessibility became the thing. I could get it from people all of a sudden, and then I just started smoking. But growing up in Texas was still a little different because I mean, and I know where you're gonna go with this, but like I was always a little cautious. Like, hey, be careful. There's cops. We should watch out. Let's not smoke too much. But then I get out to California, and I'm just like. Everywhere, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm out there, but then I kind of find out it's actually illegal. You can't,
Yeah, you can't
just
smoke in public
out
places
in
on the
public
street.
and shit on the street.
But once
like,
again, that's a law that's not really enforceable.
it's not really. It's not really.
There's
Like
not enough handcuffs in the state of California for all that.
That's funny.
So true. But so I mean, it's a lot more laxed in that sense. You can just smoke anywhere. But then that shit fucked me up because I grew up there. Then we get on tour and we'd be in other states and play. Oh, you remember Dallas when we were in tour in Dallas? We were back in tour in Dallas. I'm smoking outside the place and they start hassling me. Like I'm on tour, so I'm like an artist at the venue and I'm smoking outside and shit. And they're all like,
Oh, I do remember this.
I was smoking inside and they try to kick me out of the goddamn concert. And I'm like, bro, what the fuck? I'm like, I'm from California, man. It's like, it's different.
I'm part of the crew.
And they were like, I don't give a fuck. This is Texas. It's not legal here. And this now you need to get the fuck out. You're not allowed back in. They were really like not
It's
about
funny
to
because
let me
literally
in.
at this very moment, Modson was smoking weed in the backstage of this venue.
Yeah. But it just had me fucked up because then people would always be like, we would be like trying to smoke with people and they're like, yo, we're just gonna smoke right here.
I used to,
And I was
even
like-
when I lived in Texas,
Yeah.
people were always doing this to me. I had a car very early in my high school year. I actually started smoking the summer before my freshman year. There's a guy, an older dude. He was a junior when I was a freshman. He lived down the street, and he's who introduced me to weed. But I remember when I had my car, people would be like, "Hey, man, you want to skip class and go smoke?" Basically, I'll provide the weed, you provide the place. And I was like, absolutely. I don't even want to go to class anyways. So I would drive them down, literally just like a few blocks down Walsham Boulevard in San Antonio, and I'd just park us in this parking lot. It's like a shopping center parking lot. And they were like, we're just gonna smoke right here with all these cars around. And I was like, you mean these people that are living their lives and minding their own goddamn business? Yeah, we're gonna smoke right here. Like, none of these people are even noticing you right now. I was like, if you see a cop, just put it down.
Yeah.
If anybody else, I remember one time a guy from a store came out and was like, hey man, can't do that right here. And And I was like, yeah, word, appreciate you. We just drove a little bit around to the other side of the building, and he was like, do you think we should stay here? And I was like, you think that guy's gonna take time out of his day to call the cops?
You know what I'm saying? But
it's not happening.
People do have this weird, misconception that like people can stop you from doing
yeah. Like, I'll never forget. I'm hotboxing in my car with some friends of mine, and we're just in a neighborhood, and in my rearview mirror I can see this woman. She's like watching her kids play basketball on their little hoop in the driveway, and like she's looking at us and stuff because we've been parked there for quite some time now. Hours. We were smoking a lot, and she's like looking, and my other homies are like, yo, she's still looking at us. And I was like, she cannot do anything. She is just a woman, so don't worry about it. They were like, what if she calls the cops? And I was like, I'm looking at her, she's not calling the cops, she's just glaring at us.
I mean, best she could come over here and try and kick our ass, but
finally she walks up to the vehicle. She comes up to the vehicle to my window, and I roll it down, and literally smoke is just pouring out of this vehicle into her face. And she's like, I know what you're doing in here. And I looked up at her, and I was like, right. And she goes, I'm gonna call the police. And I was like, right. And I rolled my window back up. I let her walk all the way back to the thing. And then they were like, dude, we should get the fuck out of here. And I was like, I'm gonna go. I was like, don't worry though. I mean, the response time in this city is 17 minutes. I think we're good for, a woman's gonna call.
Especially on there's 2 men outside smoking.
There's a group of hoodlums in my neighborhood smoking weed in their car. I need you to come get them.
You said I have white privilege.
Right,
Jesus
we're
Christ.
gonna come get that.
This man said, right, bitch, what you gonna do?
So I'm half black.
That was not against the police though. That's the point. That's the point.
So then we were driving away, and they were like, are you worried that she like got your license plate? And I was like, and what? The cops are gonna come to my house, they're gonna look my license plate up, and they're gonna come to my house, and they're gonna say, excuse me, sir, we were told that you were smoking weed in a neighborhood. We have no evidence to back that up, but we'd like to speak with you about it. And I was like, you guys aren't thinking rationally about this. These people have lives that they're living, and they don't have time to waste with us.
Which brings...
Wait, I was gonna say, you brought me to a great idea, which is the hiding in plain sight smoking in the car. That was my shit too.
Yeah. Oh, it's
and
the best.
it is such a. I wonder if kids today still do it, because a lot of states, it's like 35 have different marijuana laws, whether it's medicinal or recreational. So it's like they're not getting. I don't know if they're still getting that or not, but that was a big thing for me, especially when I came back from the army, and I was just like looking for places that I could smoke, Oh man, we used to have so much fun. I found this loop. It was medical buildings, and it was just a circle like this that was about 3 miles, and it was just medical buildings all inside of it, and it was right off the highway and kind of behind a hospital,
like an industrial park.
It was an industrial park, but it was like wooded, and it had a lot of traffic because Google Maps would bring you there if you were trying to get to the mall. So we just looped that. We would loop that bitch for hours, dog. Hours. Just, you would never see a cop. It was mad chill. You can just go to one of the random medical places and just park and be like, I got an appointment with this rolling paper. Like, it was great, man. Like, the idea of hiding in plain sight. Yeah, I smoked many a joint and hit many a pipe hiding in a parking lot of like a Ross Dress for Less.
But it's not like that anymore, I don't think, for kids. Like I said, it's so acceptable these days.
I don't think like even less people care these days.
Right. Like like I said, the legalities of it are already so fluid, and then the social acceptability is a lot higher now too. So I think it's almost just like, oh, there's people smoking.
Especially if you're in a big city. Now, if you're in like a rural small town with a lot of like traditional minded people, maybe it's different. But I mean, if you live in somewhere like San Antonio, I don't know where you lived in Carolina.
North of Charlotte.
So like a suburb of Charlotte. Yeah. So yeah, like you weren't out in the sticks per se, but you were closer. You could get there.
You could get there.
Well, I mean, you could get anywhere from
halfway
anywhere.
between both.
Yeah, but I think that's another big part that plays into it, is like, especially because in a city there's so many people around that you don't pick out one or two, which would normally be suspicious activity. Like if somebody in their office noticed your car looping around them for hours on end, they could have got suspicious, but they're busy. They got a lot of shit going on. When you're just sitting on your porch, with your shotgun next to you and stuff, you see shit like that. You're like, this guy's been driving around my house fucking 4 hours in a row now. I wonder what's going on.
I'm definitely not doing a loop around like Brumley Drive. Like,
not to mention, in those places, the police response time is a lot quicker.
2-3 minutes max.
Those motherfuckers are right around the corner. It's like, oh yeah, Jim, I'm not doing anything. I'll pull over right now.
Yeah, he like goes to your family's dinners and shit.
So I think it is a different experience. But I mean, like I said, Texas is pretty conservative. They definitely have not legalized or even come close to legalizing marijuana. But to caveat to that, I mean, I grew up in West Texas and stuff. That's where I was smoking a lot. And then that was more like, hush hush, go do my friend's house. Yeah, But then Austin was not like that at all.
Laissez-faire.
Austin is just like, I mean, like I said, we smoke out on the street. It was like being in California. So it's been interesting to watch it progress over the years and how it's changed so much since, marijuana first, I'm going to say first came around, that too, but since I was first introduced to it.
Yeah.
By the way, I also want to let you, because you were between 10th and 11th grade.
I was 11th and 12th, yeah.
11th and 12th grade. You were between what, 9th and 10th?
8th and 9th grade.
8th and 9th. I think I was between 7th and 8th because I still had a year in middle school after the first time I smoked, and was getting into a lot of trouble, and then went into ROTC. But I definitely remember my freshman year, like early on, smoking a lot because I was able to get it pretty easy.
Yeah.
But I do, definitely between 7th and 8th grade, I think is my answer on that. I remember the exact incident. I just can't place which summer. I just know I was so young, I had to get up on my tiptoes to hit it was a pipe with 4 hoses. And my friend's brother was like, well, it was a hookah made by rednecks that probably cost 10 cents to make. Yeah, DIY hookah. Okay. And my brother's friend went like this and like brought one of the pipes down without my brother seeing. I got up on my fucking tiptoes. It was like super duper high.
I was gonna ask why was it that you got into smoking
Mine
weed?
was proximity. My entire family, basically my entire family smoked weed. So it was like when everybody's smoking weed and you're the only one not doing it, you're as soon as you figure it out.
It's a matter of time before you're like, all right, let me get in line with my
exactly. Well, it's more like I've written a couple songs about like addiction, and we've talked about addiction before, and it's like when addicts are dropping their habits on the ground, people are picking that shit up.
Yeah, I feel you. So you just kind of picked it up by being
I had no, literally it wasn't even in my wheelhouse at all. I had my friend AJ who I knew smoked weed, but it's not like I was yearning to smoke weed or whatever. But one morning I just decided I was out at the bus stop super early and I didn't feel like standing there by myself the whole time. So I was like, I'm going to walk down to AJ's bus stop. So I walked down there and he's literally smoking out of a Dr. Pepper can that he had smashed. Yes, the can. And I just sit down on the curb with him and he's smoking and he was like, you want some of this? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And I smoked it and I remember it was the most fun ride I ever had on the bus to school in my life. Even after I had started smoking weed regularly and was riding the bus to school, nothing compared to that first bus ride. I wasn't talking to anybody. Me and AJ didn't sit in the same seats. I was just like, dude, what is happening right now? I was like, everything's so much better right now.
Funny.
And I guess that's mostly just because riding the bus is usually a pretty boring experience anyways. Right. And that's kind of one of the things that I've always felt like weed does, is it makes the little things that you normally find boring kind of interesting, or at least worthy of a little bit of humor or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's kind of how it started. But even after that, I didn't really start smoking regularly until I was well into my freshman year of high school.
Yeah, same here, freshman year.
Yeah. I kind of similar situations, I guess. I just started to move out of my parents' house because I moved out in my senior year of high school, and so I had just moved out, and my friend of mine was like, slash kicked out,
slash ran away.
Yeah, it was a really murky situation.
Didn't mean to put you on blast there. I just thought it was a funny way of saying you were like, I moved out, and I was like, that kind of puts a different context on it.
It's true. It was I was at odds with my family, and so I just kind of split. But in Texas, you can legally live on your own and all that when you're 17 and stuff. So I just bounced, but not that my parents were going to try and stop me or anything. But then I got introduced to it, and then what happened was I used to hang out with some cats that lived down in an apartment below. That was when I first got introduced to it. I think it was Christmas or something, and I was the first Christmas I was living away from my family, and my friend was like, yo, I'm gonna get you high today. You know what I mean? I'm gonna show you this. And I was like, all right. And it was fun. We had a blast. And then I distinctly remember not the pleasantry of it. It was food. That was the first time I was like, oh my God, everything tastes amazing.
This is the best food ever. And you're eating ramen and shit like that. Yeah. You're like, this is amazing. What this is a meal fit for a king.
That was surprising. But then I started hanging out with these cats, and they would smoke weed all the time. They'd play video games and stuff and smoke. And I just started hanging out with them. And then that just kind of, it's
like you said, proximity. Proximity is the reason that we all got into it. That's the only way that
anything.
It's very rare for somebody who's never been around anybody that smokes weed, never had an experience like going to a party or anything, to just be like, man, I'm bored. I think I'm gonna try to find somebody that smokes weed and get some weed from them. It's just like, that's tough. Like, where do you start with that?
You get introduced to it.
Yeah,
right,
somebody brings it into your.
Have you guys ever had a positive experience introducing someone to it?
Introducing? Nah, I was never really that kind of person.
I don't ever remember being like bringing somebody to weed for the first time. I mean, maybe this guy. I mean, I remember being like, "You ever smoke weed?" And he was like, "No," but I guess he had. And then I was like,
I was playing my cards close to my chest.
Yeah. And so I was like, "Let's smoke some weed." He's like, "All right." I think he's skeptical of me, but besides that, I mean, I don't think I've ever really gotten anybody into.
I don't know if it was like the first time or anything like that, but I've had friends that were, had never really had experiences with it or lots of experience with it, like feel comfortable enough around me to do it around me in like a safe environment, and seen both positive and negative results when doing so. Like I've seen it where someone then had a positive relationship with it for a brief period, maybe 6 months to a year, and then decided it wasn't for them and doesn't really do it anymore and doesn't miss it. And I've also seen a kid do it, I say kid 18, 19, do it once or twice and then just completely turned off, and it was the worst. I got sick, I got too high, room was spinning, shit like that. So I've seen different reactions, but I will say the one guy that did have a positive relationship with it for a little while did struggle with a lot of the things that they prescribe medicinal marijuana for. Things like anxiety and I'm trying
insomnia.
And they call it it's not circular logic, but it's something like that. It's some term that I heard recently on like a documentary that was talking about how like intrusive thoughts, I think is what it was. Have you guys heard of it's the idea that like
all
you can't stop.
Intrusive.
Well, it's like something that you can't stop thinking about that's causing you stress. So if it's something it's intrusive at that point because you don't want it there, it's barging into your space. And that was they were talking about marijuana and how it helps with things like that. And I was like, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I
might have saved this. I might have cured this man's disease.
Well, and that's the thing about the idea of medicinal marijuana is, did I?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I did. I'm not saying that it has all these medicinal benefits, but science is saying it has certain medicinal benefits. And personal anecdotal experience, I've seen it with that particular person. My own experiences, my own experiences with it are tainted because of my extreme heavy use for such a prolonged period of time. So I would not say that like I'm a case study in like medicinal marijuana and symptom clusters because I've just been smoking my entire life.
But there are tons of studies out there that show that medicinal, like, or marijuana as a substance has medicinal qualities, right? Like there is use to the plant. I think that that's just what I've noticed too, is just like, how are you using it? Very often some people are using it for medicinal purpose, but then other people are just blazing every day saying, oh, I got glaucoma,
whatever. I will say that for the most part, especially being somebody who worked in the cannabis industry for a while, and like big in like the medical side of it and whatnot, like the number one thing that I've seen cannabis help people with is epilepsy. Like it seems to be very like it works really well for helping people with their seizures and epilepsy symptoms. But I mean, like I've always had this kind of weird idea of it, like I never used it medicinally. Like once I started using it, like I was using it recreationally to like have fun and get high. But I will say that from the ages of 9 to the age of like 13, like right when I started, like the first time I started, before I even started smoking regularly, I was diagnosed with chronic migraines, and I had been hospitalized on 4 separate occasions for these migraines, just waking up in the middle of the night screaming in pain, vomiting and stuff like that, nausea, all the big symptoms. And the only things that changed in my life at that time were when the migraines went away, was that I started smoking weed and I started being less active. And so like I kind of ruled out the less activity as being a trigger for like curing my migraines. But since I started smoking weed all the way up until now, I've only had one serious migraine at all, and that was when we were on tour and we were under an immense amount of like work and stress, and like I was sleep deprived and stuff like that, driving around in a car all day to different time zones and stuff.
Dead in a Pittsburgh hotel. Dude, on the floor.
I was dead, and it's like, and it wasn't even like I did that. Like now I can feel them coming on, and so I take preemptive measures like that. Like it wasn't even like stage 4 or whatever. Like I'd say it was probably in like stage 2, and I was like, I gotta go fucking lay down, otherwise this shit's gonna kill me. And that's the only one. So from 9 to 13, I had one really bad one a year, to the point where I had to go to a hospital. And then from 13 to 25, I've had one. And it's like, I didn't start getting healthy until way later until after that. So it's like, I don't know whether or not was one of the things that helped with it or not, but I do know, like, as an anecdotal like observation that I've made in my own life, something changed right around that same time frame that completely took migraines out of my whole lifestyle.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely they've talked about like nausea. It can help a lot with nausea too, and like stomach things, because I told you it has a very profound effect on your appetite and stuff like that.
Yeah. But
I was just reading this right here where it says the FDA has only approved it for treatment of 2 rare and severe forms of epilepsy. So it hasn't even really been approved. And now that's just obviously the FDA, which isn't necessarily a good barometer of like what the efficacy of something actually is.
And the reasoning is they can't do research with a Schedule 1 drug.
Yeah, see,
right.
yes, that makes sense.
So if that wasn't a Schedule 1 drug, if it was Schedule 4 like Valium, right? Then like you could very easily like probably prove through
run studies,
or at least
FDA sponsored studies. There's tons of studies that go into the medicinal stuff. They're just not FDA sponsored, and so those studies can't be used in the FDA's recommendations or like approving of it for certain things. But yeah, that's the number, like the number one thing that all of the patients that bought our cannabis extracts and stuff like that was epilepsy. They were like, yeah, my son, like I remember we were selling rosin to this woman for her son, that she would use. She would take it and do other stuff with it to get it into like capsule form, because it's not like this kid had really bad epilepsy, like to the point where he was like, you would think that he was just like mentally disabled basically. But you know, like she made it to where like he wasn't really getting like high from it, turning into these little capsules that he would take, but like she swore by it, and she was like, I can't, there's no other drugs. She moved all the way to California just to help her son
be able to use it. Other one I see is pain management, right? Like I feel like there's still no better painkiller in the world than marijuana, like a good heavy indica bud, man.
Well, because it's in my opinion, it's a mood enhancer. So if you're in pain and you got something that makes everything interesting and funny, it might help you manage that pain a little bit.
It does. Like it
I think it works. I think it works differently than taking like a muscle relaxer, where it literally just dulls the receptors that are firing the pain signals. Whereas in kind of in the context that you were saying, it more distracts you from the pain. It allows you to focus on things and have more of an upbeat personality, like upbeat outlook on certain things, and not be so focused on the pain itself.
To piggyback on the migraine thing, one of the things, you know, I've had symptom clusters of PTSD and things like that, but marijuana is not necessarily, like I said, I'm not a good barometer for what it can do to help you with things like that. But outside of the social realm with sleep is the big one for me, where I feel like when I was not smoking weed regularly, including my 6 years active duty in the military, past relationships that girls didn't want me smoking weed, I'd quit for long periods, different jobs, trying to get jobs, I would quit for extended periods. I would always have nightmares, really intense, really stressful, really violent nightmares. And when I smoke weed, whether it's during the day or before bed, I don't have those dreams, or they're very rare, and they are usually, when they are they are remembered, when I can get up and actually remember them for an extended period, they're usually non-violent. They're usually just something wacky or weird. But for whatever reason, and this is all anecdotal, like I said, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but some suppression of REM sleep appears to help with that area of my life. And that's something like, you look up here and I see a lot of different things it can help with. It doesn't necessarily say that.
No. I think Mac's going to talk about this, but I'm going to go ahead and throw my anecdotal in real quick, because this is something I've experienced. I just quit smoking. Like I was regular use. I was regular use smoking weed. I said I started in high school and stuff, and I smoked weed all the way through. We were both in the military. I didn't smoke weed in the military. I mean, on occasion I did, like when I was on a long leave or something. You best believe I ran straight up and was like, time to get high.
Yeah, what you gonna do?
Smoke weed for like those first 3 days, and then I, would let the rest of the month like get out of my system. But still, we smoked hella spice. I mean, that fake shit, I smoked that shit like almost every day. So I was still getting high.
These are your soldiers, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
yeah,
They fucked around and made me UPL guy. I was the guy who was in charge of the piss test, and I would be smoking every day.
Yeah, my squad leader was ready clean.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
on deck.
Had that shit on deck.
And then even Afghanistan, when I was on as a contractor, I smoked weed every single day. I mean, even deployed. So, I mean, I've been smoking like heavily, constantly for a long time. And then just last year, maybe 2 years ago, I started experimenting with this idea of sobriety and stuff. And I was like, you know, I want to see. I mean, I've been smoking like this for 15 years, 16 years. I was like, I don't even remember what it's like to live life without it anymore. And so I wanted to start, doing that experiment. But anyways, that's led me to different bouts of, going without it. And then now recently, I just stopped these last couple of months, or 1 month, actually. It's just been 1 month since I haven't been smoking weed at all. And all of a sudden I've been having these fucking dreams that I never had dreams before. I mean, I've had them before, but I wasn't able to link it to marijuana. At first I thought it was because I quit smoking cigarettes and stuff, but anyways, I started having these dreams, crazy dreams, man. And same thing, I wouldn't necessarily call mine nightmares, but they definitely weren't like, they're filled with anxiety, it's like a lot of like worry in my dreams, like, oh, I gotta get here, I gotta get away from this thing or something.
Where's my weapon?
Like,
that's a
stuff
big
like that.
Where's my weapon?
Like, so anxiety filled dreams, but it's been interesting, like ever since I quit smoking weed, they've been hitting me like a motherfucker.
Yeah, same with me. I wouldn't say that mine are nightmares or filled with anxiety, really. They're, like he said, kind of just like wacky. Like some of the ones that you've had before when you can remember your dreams while you're smoking. But now that I've stopped. So a few months ago, I did like a 30-day sobriety thing, kind of on the same level that you were on. Like, I just want to see what it's like to be sober again. And I think it's now about a month since I last smoked weed again. I'm going to go the whole year without smoking weed, which would be like the longest I'd ever done it since I started. Mm-hmm. And I also have had dreams. Like, I have dreams like every single night now. And it's like, none of them are really like alarming to me, or like sometimes I'll wake up and if it's like that one I told you, it was kind of like an interesting premise I thought for like a movie or like a short or something like that.
I walked in on that and it blew my mind.
Like I'll write that down. But most of the time, like I wake up and I'm like, man, weird. And then I just get to my morning routine. But my whole thing with it is like, I wanted to talk about sort of the post smoking weed since I've quit. And that was like the number one thing that was fascinating to me was like the dreams. Like it was, because I used to tell people, like, even when we were talking about dreams and stuff like that, like in high school, I'd be like, I don't have dreams. Sleep to me is like time travel. Yeah. I go to sleep and then instantaneously I feel like no time has elapsed at all, but I'll wake up and it'll be 8-7 hours later.
I love that feeling.
It's great. Like I love that feeling too. And now sometimes like I'll wake up and I'll be like, whew, just had a long
sleep is
whatever.
An active
like sleep is now an active
Yeah.
process now. And so I did some research, not like a lot of it, but I did some research on why this was. And I had heard that idea that like smoking weed can suppress REM sleep, which is the REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's one of the phases of sleep that you go through in a cycle. You go through about 4 or 5 of these cycles per night, and REM sleep is usually the one that is associated with the most active dreaming.
Brain activity.
Brain activity, well, that depends on how you define brain activity, because your brain is active the whole time you're asleep. But for like visual and auditory and stuff like that, like REM sleep is the only sleep where your body is shut down. So like if you've ever watched a dog dream, you can see it like twitching and its muscles will be twitching and stuff. And that's because the nervous system of animals, most animals, including dogs, doesn't actually fully shut down when they go into rapid eye movement sleep. It continues to operate, which is why you can see dogs barking and kind of twitching their legs. They don't have full control over it, so they're not like literally running in place, but you can see them like they're like, oh, he's chasing something like a rabbit or whatever in their dreams.
That's right, people. Dogs dream.
Dogs dream. This is very true. This is a fact. And so in doing my research, I was like, okay, well, let me find out more about this. Like, is it just as simple as smoking weed suppresses REM sleep? And as I expected, it is not that simple. It actually does many different things to what doctors call sleep architecture. And so firstly, it says here, I had a little article that I went through to kind of learn a little bit about this. And it says, we're starting with a common question. How does cannabis affect sleep architecture, the cycles and stages of sleep we experience every single night? And there isn't a simple answer to that question, in large part because there are several factors that come into play when looking at this. And the factors that they listed are dosing, so how much weed you're consuming, how it's consumed, so if you're like vaping it, smoking it, if you're doing like topicals and creams and stuff like that, like all of these different, if you're ingesting it with edibles, all of these different ways of consuming cannabis lead to different ways of it affecting your sleep and your body in general. And it also is one of the biggest factors is the strain of cannabis that you're smoking. Not necessarily like the strain name, like Blue Dream or whatever, but like the actual chemical and cannabinoid breakdown of the weed itself. And so like when you think about like the strains, a lot of people know that there's like indica and there's like sativa, and they think like, like, oh, well, the indica is like really heavy, body relaxing, and so they associate that with sleeping, whereas sativa is kind of like energizing and stuff like that. Yeah, like a head high, and you don't really get that same body high. And actually that has more to do with the terpene profile of the cannabis rather than the if it's indica or sativa. And actually what I was really like blown away at the idea that CBD, the main cannabinoids in weed that people know of are THC, which is a psychoactive one, and CBD, which a lot of people refer to as like the medical one. That's the one that they put in creams and stuff like that. And like you said, you had a CBD joint, and a lot of people don't like them if they're into smoking weed because they like to just get high.
Yeah, it doesn't get you high.
Doesn't get you high. It's non-psychoactive. However, as far as when it comes to sleep, THC is actually the one that has the higher effect on your sleep. And it's not necessarily about whether it was indica or sativa, but it's the THC content of the weed. So higher THC content leads to more REM sleep suppression, and it leads to more heightened changes in your sleep architecture. So
my research has shown me that. Based upon my research studies, let me tell you, I get 86% sativa dominant THC shit.
I've been doing studies for 27 years, and let me tell you, my studies concur with these facts.
Yes, my studies are very parallel.
And so you can't really think about it when you're thinking about it. You shouldn't think about it in the terms of like indica makes you sleepy and sativa makes you like energized or whatever. Like it has a lot more to do with the actual breakdown of the cannabis. And it says here, within the body, activation of the endocannabinoid system has been shown to lengthen non-REM sleep phases. The sedative properties of cannabis, most closely associated with the cannabinoid THC, as well as several other different terpenes found in cannabis, help shorten sleep latency, which means that it helps you fall asleep quicker, which is another thing that I've experienced, is that it's harder for me to fall asleep when I don't smoke weed. Like I just have to lay in bed for a little bit longer than I normally would. Sometimes I'll just be falling asleep when I'm trying to work if I smoke too much.
Yeah.
And I thought that was always an indica thing. I'm like, man, I got some indica. I gotta smoke the sativa. Yeah. And like that sort of felt like it, but if I smoked too much, I was just gonna fall asleep anyway.
That's true.
And so a persuasive body of research has demonstrated that cannabis is likely to increase deep, non-REM, slow wave sleep. So this is stages 3 and 4 of sleep. And so you go through like 3 or 4 different phases of sleep, depending on the studies you look at. The first phase is stage 1 and 2, which is light sleep. And this is basically like, it's quick wave, and wave meaning like your brainwave activity. It's fast wave sleep, which is, a lot of people kind of just think of that as like the period when you're falling asleep or like you've just gone to sleep, and they don't really consider it very beneficial, but it is. Like your body does a lot of things in this these stages of sleep.
Hypnosis also.
Hypnosis is also, it's very linked with this. Like when you're being hypnotized, you're kind of in this, I think they're called theta waves, and theta is a very high frequency wavelength.
That's how you feel too before you get your first cup of coffee. Like when you wake up in the morning and you're just like,
I did not know that.
Awake, but you're like tired still. That's the same thing.
It's kind of interesting that you feel slow when your brain waves are moving fast.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very like that dichotomy is like hard to wrap your head around. Yeah. The deep sleep, which is referred to as phase 2, stages 3 and 4. that is when your body engages in the most restorative work, like repairing cells and tissues, strengthening your immune function, and it has some important contributions to memory processing. And so what studies have shown is that it shortens the amount of time that you need to fall asleep when you smoke weed, but also that it lengthens the second phase of sleep, kind of pushing the REM and the first phase of sleep into the peripheral.
So weed's just knocking you out clean.
Weed's just sending you into deep sleep.
Just like, pow,
boom,
like
go
instantaneously.
And that's probably why a lot of people feel like with the pain, the muscle relaxing,
and why we also felt like we were time traveling, like
7 to 8 hours.
Just go straight
to sleep
because it sounds like an opioid. Yeah, it literally.
And it's if you for instance, if you're getting more deep sleep in the 8 hours that you sleep, let's just say you're sleeping 8 hours. If you get more deep sleep, then you're getting more cell tissue repair, you're getting more immune function strengthening and stuff like that. So that probably is what's accounting for a lot of the medicinal or like muscle relaxing benefits that you feel from weed. It's probably coming in your sleep rather than when you smoke. But there's also a fair amount of attention paid to the effects on REM sleep, and cannabis, especially THC rich strains, are likely to reduce levels of REM sleep. This is the stage of sleep when we do our most active dreaming and when the brain does a lot of memory processing and consolidation of acquired information, as well as processing emotional experiences. So that would explain why if you're having these very intense emotional dreams or these you're doing your most active dreaming, and I think that that's linked with the idea of memory processing and stuff like that, because they always, you hear that thing about like you can't come up with new people in your dreams, or like the stuff that you construct your dreams out of
is stuff from your
memory. It's stuff that you're pulling. You can't just like make stuff up while you're being unconscious.
My initial reaction is to dispute that.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that if an AI can just create people, like on like with like whatever, there's like a website where you can just, it like creates fake people's faces, you know what I mean? Like if our brains are computers, I would believe that my brain would be capable of just making up a fake person.
First of all, you just don't really understand how the AI is doing that, because what it's doing is it's just randomizing parts of faces that have been uploaded to the AI. So it's not creating new faces.
But it's using parts of all these other ones to create a
That's
new
exactly
face.
what your brain's doing. So your brain doesn't, like, you might not know the people in your dream, but it's not creating new people that you've never seen before.
Well, it would be if it was taking little tiny bits and pieces from everyone you've ever seen.
It's a semantic argument. Depends on how you feel about it. And all I'm saying is that your brain operates, like the way an AI is creating those faces is the same way that your brain would be pulling people into your dreams.
It's got to build off of what you already know.
It's got to build off of what you already know. Yeah. So like you're not going to come up with, like, the idea is not that you're coming up with new people per se, but that you don't come up with like new aliens that you've never seen before, stuff like that. Like your brain has to work with what it has.
Like I've dreamed of Paris, but I've never been to Paris, but I've seen Paris. So like I've
like
seen
movies
pictures
and stuff like that. You just work off of this.
Thing,
but could you create a world that you've never seen before?
I don't think that you can though.
It's there's like
even if you're like, okay, maybe you've seen it in a movie, maybe you've seen it, somewhere, like you've seen it somewhere, but the idea that you're gonna pull in, it's like you said, like a computer can create things, but only based on things that have already been programmed into it. It can't make up. That's why we don't have like actual machines that can think, right? Like they can only
mimic thinking.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I think that our brain works in the same way.
Yeah, and the only difference is that when you're talking about an AI, it's doing the same processings as like a conscious brain, but your brain is unconscious. So you can creatively come up with new ideas based off of things that you've already seen consciously. Subconsciously is a totally different matter, and I'm not well versed enough to tell you whether or not it's the same when you're conscious or unconscious.
I'll tell you this though, for most of my dreams, I know what's going on, like where I'm at. It's military related, or it's like people from my past. Now it can be random people. Like the other day, I had this dream of this girl that I follow on Instagram and stuff, and like I'm kind of friends with her, but not really. And just for some reason it was her, but I knew who she was. Like I've known these people. Like I said, it's usually dreams of experiences that I've had in some weird way. Just the other night I had this dream where I was running through like Skid Row style Los Angeles, like way like this ultra
like apocalyptic dystopian.
Yeah, right. But like it was just like a condensed version of what Skid Row is like. And I had just left this school/casino, right? So these are all things that like I'm in school. I do love to play craps at the casino, so it's like it was a combination of both those things with weird dice that are
like
not
that's a new thing depending on how you define the idea of new. Being like new as in there are no such things as school casinos, or you could say that that's not really new. That's just you taking two old things and smashing them together. It was
definitely like that's what I thought of when I came from it. It was like this is me, my brain taking the idea of me being in school and the idea of me playing craps and mashing them together into like one concept in my dream, you know. So anyways, but
and I will say that we don't know enough about how dreams work to make any definitive statements about what's actually happening. The only things that we can say are from people's reports, like like you survey people after they dream and you ask them about them and you take them into like it's a
very pseudoscience. I mean,
yeah, it's like it's very subjective because people are having to like remember things and tell you about them post it happening, or you can look at their brain waves while they're asleep. Yeah. Those are the only kinds of information that really we have about dreams.
They're dreaming.
Right, exactly.
I don't want to keep going back to this point, but I just had this thought I want to get out there. Can I draw a world from a creation from my mind that has no other world's influence on it, that has a landscape that is unseen?
I would say no. I'd say that you're just combining small parts of other things.
Think about this even in art, right? Can you create art based off of something that's never been done or created before?
I would probably. I'm saying yes.
I don't understand how you would do that. Like right now you're creating a novel about space, right? But that's built on the predecessors of every other novel that you've ever read about space and every idea that's been fed to you about what space is like or something like that.
I'm using visual to try to get this point across, because like if I can visualize something that is completely new, that
the fact that you're we're saying that we're taking you one layer deeper and saying that the fact that you are visualizing it means that it's not new, because you have to make that image up out of something.
Yeah. Out of something. You know what I mean? Like you have to have
you don't paint a painting with nothing. It's true. There has to be paint there.
It has to be something.
Yes. But in the idea that like this world is all these other worlds I've ever thought of or ever seen, like I'm just saying, like, could you think of something new?
That's like I look at it as like a cooking recipe. Maybe this is an analogy. A cooking recipe, you can combine all of the different variants of ingredients in different ways. You can toast the garlic, you can not toast the garlic, and you can make this new dish that nobody's ever seen before. It's literally never been cooked before.
But it's built
on all of the things that everybody cooks with all the time.
And the idea of roasting. You know, the idea of like
you had to bake it.
You know what I mean?
Like you're not coming up with new cooking methods and stuff like that. Like it's built upon things that you've already had at your disposal, even though it may seem novel to you.
Yeah, I agree. And then, I mean, we see this in everything. Like people right now who are like, man, I'm making the newest music, man. Like this music's never been made before and this and that. It's like, bro, what are you talking about? Like every music has ever been made before. You know what I mean? Like,
this is just opinions also. It's not, I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm just saying that I disagree.
I would just say that no. Yeah, I mean, I don't.
My opinion is that my dreams can create things that that aren't coming from memories.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah. Anyways, the thing that really struck me though was the fact that it's not so much it's not so cut and dry with the sleep thing, because I've also talked to people like somebody that I used to work with at a cannabis company, and so we smoked weed all the time. We were smoking while we were high and stuff, or while we were working.
You weren't allowed to smoke weed while you're at
allowed.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a cannabis company. Like you think that you're gonna get a bunch of stoners together at work and
follow all the rules?
Smoke? Yeah, like it's pretty. Yeah. Now they had that in their policies for legal reasons because according to the state, you couldn't do that.
That's just, when I toured the facility, they were like, "No, you can't smoke on the grounds and stuff." So
they don't let visitors and shit smoke on the ground, but they're definitely smoking on those grounds.
There's a difference between a law and being allowed.
Yeah, exactly. So and she said that she has dreams all the time, whether she smokes, doesn't smoke, doesn't really matter. And so it's like there's a lot more going into play with it than just being like weed suppresses REM sleep or that you don't dream when you smoke or something like that.
And I love that too, because I think that there's nuance with this whole thing, because like you said, a lot of people are like, when you said this earlier, marijuana is a mood enhancer, right? And I love you said in my opinion, but I'm just saying like that's what a lot of people will tout around. It's like this is a mood enhancer. But for some people, it's a very decreasing in their moods. Like they get anxiety, they have panic attacks. They're like
become paranoid.
Makes them dumber or makes them quiet down.
But it's not a pleasurable mood experience for them. So tout marijuana as these like blanket ideas of like it's gonna suppress your sleep, or it's going to make you feel good, or it's gonna like I think it does a disservice to a lot of people with marijuana stuff.
And there are cases of people with epilepsy taking different forms of cannabis and it making it worse. So it's not like you can't really make a blanket statement about cannabis even on that front, where we all agree that like, hey, like it seems to really help people with epilepsy, which it does, but not everybody with epilepsy.
Well, is that because each person's biology is unique? Like some people can take aspirin and just die from it.
Yeah,
True.
And it's the same reason like
when people talk
about vaccines, and there's like these anti-vaxxers and stuff like that. They don't believe in getting vaccines and stuff for various different reasons. But I know a lot of them point to the negative reactions that people have from vaccines. But when you look at the numbers, like when you actually look at the amount of people that have negative reactions, it's like an allergic reaction to something. So like it's not like peanuts are bad because a very small portion of the population are allergic to peanuts. It's just that those people can't eat peanuts, And so it's the same thing with vaccines. There's some sort of ingredient in that vaccine that when 1% of the 10 million people that took that vaccine took it, it gave them, an inflamed reaction or something.
One
like
of the
that.
inflamed reactions to marijuana is psychotic breaks and psychosis. That's something that if you have schizophrenia or any like very deep in the spectrum versions of mental health diseases, like it can really fuck you up according to what I've read and seen.
So I mean so that's the thing about it. I mean obviously they're begging to do more research, and they're getting to the point where they can now figure more out. But one thing I would love to point to is the fact that again, cannabis is nothing new, right? Like they've been using this for medicinal purposes and stuff for years and years and years. I think
since the dawn of time.
Some
people argue. Remember when we went to that place in LA off of Melrose? It was like a church. And like they were using it. Like I remember the guy giving us the tour, and he said like the way that they interpret the Bible, the sacrament is cannabis. And they were like, he kind of pointed to all these kind of. They were loose kind of interpretations, I would say, on the terminology in the Bible, which changes from one translation to another. But in their opinion, the sacrament in the Bible, when you hear people refer to the sacrament, that was cannabis. And I know that there's a lot of historical data of Native Americans using it and stuff like that. So, people, just human beings, have been using it for thousands of years.
But I would argue that also too it's just because of the nature of the plant itself. I mean, like I said, I'll kind of lead to this whole idea of like epigenetics and things, and like the placebo effect is another thing I'll point to here. But like, aren't all plants kind of medicinal in their way? We create, it's kind of like we were just talking about, like when you create a drug, right? Is that a new thing that you made? Or did you just combine a bunch of things that are already present on Earth, and you combine them in such a way that they created a
new reaction,
right? A new reaction. So that's what I think about this with marijuana. It's a very interesting plant in that it has these psychoactive abilities and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of plants out here like that, mushrooms, like all these things. And so I think that that's kind of what lends to this idea that it does something for you. Health-wise, because as we started talking about this, like I don't see, you were saying like I think a lot of that happens in your sleep where you do cell repair and stuff, but like how could you see smoking weed actually do something to you that fixes you in a way? Like I don't see how that.
It's more of a in my cases and in a lot of things I see it's more of just symptoms, like treating symptoms.
Well, I think what he's getting at more is like when I read that point about we know that the stages of deep sleep are where you do cell repair and immune function and stuff like that. So if something can just lengthen that amount of time that you're in deep sleep, given the amount of time that you'll be asleep, then you could make an argument, and there's no like scientific basis behind it, but you could say like, well, maybe that means that there's more cell repair happening during that time, because you only have a certain amount of time and you cycle in and out of these stages multiple times in sleep. So if you get more of the cycle of sleep that says that that's where the cell repair happens, then I can see how people can make that argument.
But I'm making the point that medicine doesn't cure you of things, right? It's like in the end, it might open up your brain's ability to cure yourself, right? Or like create some chemical reaction that you need in your brain to like start a repair process or kick on a certain function of your body. But it's always your body that repairs you. Right?
Yeah,
it's like your own brain that repairs.
It's an exterior
you.
trigger for
it's
those
like
things
a trigger
happening.
to happen. So I think that's when I think about, marijuana being that too, because I'm like, yeah, it relaxes you and it makes you happy or funny or whatever. But then how is that like fixing you, and I think it just kind of enacts that placebo effect. Even when we talked about pain, it's not killing the pain, you know what I mean? It's distracting you from the pain, and then maybe in that distraction you can trigger something else in your body to start a regeneration process or something.
Also it's not taking the source of that pain and like rebuilding
it.
It's just making you not think about the
like if you break your arm and then smoke weed, it's not like your arm isn't not broken. It's just that you might not care as much.
You're not wrapping it in fucking hemp salves. Like that doesn't seem to be doing the trick.
And I mean, I wouldn't make that argument with any medicines. I think that what's cool about the the plant is that it does have that THC, and it doesn't have as many side effects to it because it's just kind of more natural.
Well, and I would say that some of the side effects are negligible, with the exception of potential cancer. I think that inhaling it through its smokable like carbon form,
that's a big deal.
Is like that is one of the
nobody talks about that.
Nobody really does, and we don't know the side effects of vaping, which is the current way. Like I like flower, like I like to roll it up in a joint and smoke it, but I also like to use vape, and that those two ways are. You can get some cancer from that. Carcinogens, there's not enough research for me to say that definitively, but based upon what I see with nicotine and all these other things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you have combustible material being inhaled while it's being combusted and the fumes that are coming off of it, there are carcinogens in that. There's nothing that burns cleanly. There's always always fumes and particulates that come off of those.
So that brings us to edibles, topicals, all these other ways where it's like, well, what's the negative side effect of taking, some butter or something and putting it inside of my food, or rubbing some sort of cream on me, or taking a little pill or something? That's going to have completely different side effects than smoking a backwoods.
Very true. Very true. And actually, because of this is something that I know from my time of working in the industry and stuff like that. But when you bring cannabis to a certain level of heat, or a THC, I should say, what actually happens is the THC goes under a different chemical change and it becomes THCA. I don't remember exactly what the A stands for, but I know that there are new ways of extraction that turn it into THCA crystalline. And so like you have they look kind of like meth crystals, honestly. Like I was really kind of worried the first time one of my homies pulled them out. He's like, hey man, you want to try this THCA? And I was like, what the fuck is that? And because at a certain time in my life, I was very much on like the leading edge of all the stuff that was happening.
Break open a light bulb, and you just
and he pulled this shit out, and I was like, what? No, I think I'm good. And he was like, no, it's weed. And I felt like my dad. The first time he watched me take a dab.
Yeah.
I remember I moved to California shortly after graduating high school to move into a house with my homies from high school, and we started growing weed. We started doing different various extractions. And I remember like after we got off of this like fucking 28 hour long drive, we came into the house and my homie Cody was like, you want a dab? And I was like, hell yeah. So my dad, we're like chatting it up and I'm seeing the house and stuff. And my dad's watching me take a blowtorch and light this big ass metal nail on this little bong thing. Yeah. And he's looking at me and looking at Cody, and Cody's pulling this like waxy substance off of this parchment paper thing that he pulled out of the freezer. And my dad has just the most distraught look on his face ever. He's like,
What the
Yeah,
fuck?
your homie's got a
looked at
coin
him.
pores with boogers in it.
Yeah, and I looked at him and I was like, "You good?" And he was like, "What's happening right now?" And I was like, "This is weed. Don't worry about it." And he was like, "That's weed?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's come a long way."
I felt the same way the first time somebody pulled out the little rubber thing and it was just, little globs and
Yep.
shit. I was just like,
Yeah.
is that biological material? Like, what
Dude,
is that,
what is
dude?
that,
You
dude?
know,
It
like
looks
I
like
was
shit.
I was lost.
These crystals look sketch as hell.
Yeah,
right.
You're right. If somebody busted that shit out of the party and was like, "You want to get high, bro?" I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Fuck no, dog."
Because
What are you
some of them look kind of yellowy, which looks sort of like keef
Like a
or whatever.
butter
It's
or
something
something.
more close to what you're used to.
Yeah.
But my homie had that super pure shit, that
That, like,
meth
top
looking
left.
shit, and I was like, that looked
shit
like glass,
look-
bro.
yeah,
I was
for
like, nah, I
real.
don't want that.
100%.
It looks
so
like
this
the
is
kind
what
of shit that'll make
happens-
you eat somebody's face in Florida.
Yeah. And so like this is what happens to, you can actually start to see one of the little chemical things
Down there, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a chemical change that happens. It looks like an oxygen. No, it's not oxygen. Yeah, like an oxygen and an oxygen hydrogen. It's not quite water, but a few different molecules bind to the THC molecule, and it creates this actually different substance. Now, depending on the way that you incorporate that into food, like if you cook like a baked good and you baked it at a higher than like 450, 475 degrees, or at least the material that you're baking got up to that temperature, then this process would happen to the THC in that. But for stuff like topicals and creams, which are usually made at a much lower temperature, it doesn't turn into THCA. And so then your body's absorbing just regular THC. And there hasn't been enough studies I don't know if there's been any studies to show what the differences between those two are. You know, we just consider like when you smoke weed, you get THC, but it's actually not like that.
It's TCA.
Yeah, and the other thing too is it's not easily made in a factory with regulations. Like
Right.
weed is very all over the place.
It's a gray area.
It's in terms of potency, what the strain will do to you.
This is what happens
different
when it's
effects.
unregulated. You know, like when you don't have laws or anything that govern something, that people think that it goes away. No, it doesn't go away. It goes into the black market.
Yeah, I've got
right?
some
and then in
numbers
the
on
black
my-
market.
yeah.
There are no rules. It doesn't. You can do anything you want to, and you can sell it any way you want to. You can manufacture any way you want to, and without study, with study, it doesn't matter. And I think that, like you said, we've seen a level of innovation happen with marijuana over the last couple of decades, and no studies, no anything to back any of this stuff up. And like you said, I jumped on that dab train real quick. I was just like, oh, this is dope. Like I started smoking dabs, and I just started smoking them, and that shit like makes you cough in a way that you never cough.
Yep.
Like it does something different to your lungs and all this stuff that you never
There's
had.
different levels of purity.
And you know what I mean? You have no idea where this stuff is getting cooked up from. Like people are just giving it to you in a glob on, this is back in the day too, like, 5, 6, 7 years ago, but a glob on a piece of paper, and a homie could have cooked that up in his house,
Yeah.
and you have
Many
no
of them
idea.
do.
And
The
like,
black market accounts for 80% of cannabis sold in California and 70% of cannabis sold in Massachusetts.
yeah.
Yep.
And then people are like, oh, it's legal now, and you get it at a store, but that shit's still coming from the black market for the most part, because those are the people who had the infrastructure built to start supplying the demand,
I remember hearing a story a few years ago. Well, I guess it's more than a few. It's a handful of years ago. But I remember hearing a story of some people getting busted from their weed being laced with microscopic not microscopic, but very small particles of glass. They would like spread it on the weed to make it look more crystally, and make
wow.
it look like it was higher quality so they could charge a higher price. And then you had these superheated glass particulates that you were inhaling,
Wow.
and they were literally like burning holes in people's lungs.
Is
as
this
they
company
inhaled
called
them.
Newport?
Well,
yeah, they're right
I don't know.
there, right there.
I have no idea because I was just buying it from a guy.
Right? But I did a little bit of research on this as I was talking about it, because this is what led me to quitting smoking weed. There's a couple things that led up to this, and I'm gonna tell you when I go on my whole bit. I've been saving my bit for the end because it is super pseudo. Like there's no science or nothing. All mine's vary, but spiritually related, right? And like how I felt. But one of the things I started noticing when we talked about like ancestors and how they used weed and like all this stuff, like this dude was talking about like back in the day they would burn cannabis seeds, and they would throw the leaves and the seeds on a thing and it would burn, and they would inhale that smoke. So I mean that already is far different from what we're doing, right? Where it's just like even seeds. But this is as early as 500 BC that they found burnt cannabis seeds in the graves of shamans in China, right? And then
Cannabis or hemp?
this is cannabis, they say. Burn cannabis seeds. Yeah.
Wow.
And this is per a document that I found, or article in history. But then this was what I thought was fascinating. We're coming all the way from burning hemp seeds, right, to now, and this is just this is the most recent data because, like you said, they're not doing a lot of research and stuff. But the amount of THC in marijuana, the chemical responsible for the drug's potency, has increased dramatically in recent decades. In the mid 1990s, the average THC content of confiscated weed was roughly 4%. But by 2014, it was about 12%, with a few strains of pot containing THC levels as high as 37%. So, I mean, we're looking at 40 times growth, you know, in the potency of marijuana. And, dude, they're saying average, but people I know who smoking weed, like you said, they smoking that dank ass. Like, you go in there and you're like, what's got the highest THC content? All right, 38%. Like, let me get that. I've seen them high as 38. I don't know if I've seen 40s, but I know I've ordered things off the black web that were like 96% THC.
Those are extracts
and stuff like that. So, I mean, the way I started looking at it, people are like, oh, you know, it's natural, you know, like weed's it's a plant.
As if it's like, the same as it always was.
Yeah, but I'm like, bruh, I mean, what we're smoking these days, I don't think that's that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that argument stands up to say that this stuff is okay or good for you or not bad for you based on the idea that it's a plant, because it's really not anymore.
So what you're saying is the Cat Williams' famous argument is not really standing up, that it's just a plant, it just grows like that
because it
doesn't just grow like that. As a man who grows weed or used to grow weed, I can tell you that it does not just grow like that. There's a thing called railroad weed where people would just toss weed out the windows on, I guess, rail cars or whatever, but you find them like on the sides of railroads. It's really funny. But that's not the same as what you see when you go into a grow house. Like, it literally, a lot of that stuff doesn't even flower.
Facts.
Yeah, and I was thinking too, you know, I did some research into a jazz musician from the 30s and 40s named Mighty Mezz, and he was an interesting cat, but one of the things that I definitely wanted to hit on was this idea that he had his own strain. He was a white guy who played clarinet in different jazz bands, and he was down with the fucking clown, bro. I'm talking like B.B. King, I don't think it was B.B. King, actually. It's blues. The other guy, Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong. He was Louis Armstrong's manager for a period. Showed up, got busted in 1940 for selling weed to him. They sent him to prison, and he has to be put with the black people because he is, quote, voluntarily a Negro.
Damn.
He was down with it.
Damn, transracial.
Bro, he was the first case I've seen of like really transracial in the sense that he was a Jewish man from suburban Chicago who became the biggest pot dealer to the jazz musicians, went to prison for it, and was allowed to be on the, quote,
just goes
Negro
to show,
side.
Wow. Has nothing to do with your skin.
Yeah. They let him go.
Oh, they put him over there. That's where he was comfortable. Wow. But the thing I wanted to get to was his strain was famous. They were known as Mezz rolls, or like who's the man with the Mezz. You can hear all these old songs where they mention it.
Yeah.
And it was his strain. And they knew if you wanted the good shit, you went to Mezz.
Yeah.
They used to call it jive. You want to talk to the man with the jive, you go find Mr. Mezz.
Is that where the term jive turkey comes from? Is that like a person who smokes weed?
I know that jive was a term for weed in the 1930s and 40s. And then also one of the quotes from Mezz I saw, he said, I feel like it's my job to get people hipping to the cannabis. And I was like, they put in parentheses to teach or learning, and I was like, damn, this man been using hipping.
Yeah.
That's trying to get the etymology of the word hippie is actually someone like who was a hip person, someone who was on the new edge. It's funny because we think of hippies as being like sort of old school nowadays, but that's just because the definition of the term hippie has changed. A hip person would be like, I don't know, like a scientist these days.
and they talk about Mezz being one of the forefathers of the beat culture, because beatniks, there was a lot of white people who were beatniks, and that was late 40s, early 50s, guys going in doing poetry, freeform jazz, where it's like, yo, fuck your 4-4-4-4, my man, like we out here getting wild with these rhyme schemes. So like that era was part of the Mezz scene.
That's
and like
badass.
The fact that this man like. The transracial thing is what really, I keep coming back to that too, because it's just like, damn, bro, like he was, and you see pictures of this man with the clarinet. He got the massive backwoods blunt looking fucking clarinet.
I need to see a picture of this man. Can you look up Mezz, bro?
Yeah, interesting cat. But yeah, the pictures of him, I was just thinking to myself like, man, this cat fits right in, baby. Big Mezz,
look at that,
fits right in, bro.
Damn,
Big J smoking the first cannabis advocate. Mezro. No, I don't know.
That's funny because I've actually seen this guy's face on, like, cannabis posters and stuff like that. I just had no idea who he was.
Yeah.
He's the man with the Mezz.
Yeah, for real.
They called him King of the Muggles.
There's
Muggles
literally
was a term for people who smoked weed at the
I
time.
wonder where
in
he's getting
every
it from.
single photo where he's with other people, they're like black.
I mean, he was hanging
He
out
like
with the
didn't
black
hang
one.
out with white people at all.
Yeah.
I love how he brings his glasses up when he plays.
He was married to an African American woman.
I mean,
That's
I wouldn't
amazing.
be surprised to hear that. I mean, he's obviously a
He
man
reminds me
who
of one of
loves
these white guys that like
African-American
moves to Japan. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm very close with these kinds of people because like I love Japanese culture and stuff like that. But for some reason, white people
Rachel
just love to
Dolezal.
branch out into the.
Look at the suggested searches. The first one's Rachel Dolezal,
Who's that?
She's the woman who self-identifies as black.
who was the
Oh
chair.
wow,
was
they
she-
like put him
yeah,
in this because I guess he was on that. You know,
He's on that wave.
he was
Yeah.
on that wave.
Milton
very-
Mezro. Wow, Milton. I wonder if like he looks a lot like Milton Friedman.
I just his story stuck out. They were talking
Yeah.
about early influences of marijuana on music culture, and it was a documentary where they were talking to Run DMC, Cypress Hill, Snoop Dogg, everybody else. They had this whole fucking segment on Mezz, and I was just like, that shit right there.
He's like the Wiz Khalifa of his generation.
Yeah,
you
this
know?
man's
Badass, yeah.
and then he went to jail over weed in 1940 when they had the fucking Marijuana Act in the 1930s.
Dude, so yeah, that's exactly what happened too. Because a lot of people don't know. It's like marijuana wasn't a big deal. Nobody really cared. Actually, nobody was even smoking marijuana at like turn of the 19th century, like 1900s and stuff in the United States. Nobody's smoking weed at all. Let me pull back up this history article that I was in, but yeah, so nobody's smoking it. But then come the 1900s and stuff, Mexicans, right? The Mexican Revolution and all that stuff happened, and there was a lot of Mexican immigrants. Well, Mexican immigrants start introducing people to pot smoking, which is interesting because most of our marijuana still comes from Mexico, right? And hence what I said I was going to tie it back around to why it's a J and not an H, right? It's because it was actually Mexicans that started introducing it to America in the first place.
I believe you're mentioning Sensimilla.
yes,
This is the
Seedless.
This is the ancestral strain of weed that all of our modern day weed comes from, because there's many different species of the cannabis plant. One of them being hemp. And hemp obviously doesn't get you high, but you can make clothes and paper and stuff out of it. And like a lot of people, like when they say like George Washington used to have a cannabis
Hemp
plant,
farm.
it's like it's hemp. They were making clothes and fiber and stuff out
They
of it.
didn't even have any psychoactive.
Yeah, they didn't
like,
smoke it. I can tell you that.
Right. This is the early 1900s. Immigrants from Mexico and the United States during the tumultuous years of the Mexican Revolution introduced the recreational practice of smoking marijuana to American culture. Massive unemployment and social unrest during the Great Depression stoked resentment of Mexican immigrants and public fear of the evil weed. As a
that devil's
result,
lettuce.
and consistent with the Prohibition era's view of all intoxicants, 29 states had outlawed cannabis by 1931. So, and then the Marijuana Tax Act comes in 1937, which further criminalizes like the imports and stuff of it.
put Mezz
But-
in jail.
Essentially, right? And
Yep.
so, but I
Damn.
mean, that's why he's probably the godfather of shit. I mean, this is the first dude to really be out here like
He was
slanging
slanging.
that, yeah,
Oh, he was
slanging that
slanging.
shit illegally, like through. He's like the Al Capone of weed,
That's
Yeah.
funny because at first he was slanging it legally because there were no laws against
Yeah,
it,
facts.
and then all of a sudden one day he woke up and it was illegal to do that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. But yeah, Mezro, his first guy to like really be out here, and of course it makes it's no surprise to me that it was heavy in music and stuff, because we still see that today in our cultures and stuff too. That marijuana is closely tied with music, because I often hear people point to marijuana helping them in their creative process. You know? I've felt that way, but at the same time, I've always been like, I don't want to end up that becoming my crutch, where I start to be like,
Like you have to smoke.
You have to
be
smoke weed
creative.
to be creative, and that
Yeah.
I think that becomes like a fail.
Yeah, I just seen a video from like an older video from David Goggins, and he was talking about how he doesn't listen to music when he works out. Specifically for that, he's like, in a lot of these races and stuff, you don't have your phone with you or whatever. He was like, I can't rely on music to get me pumped when I'm out there doing shit, because sometimes I'm not gonna have it.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have it, and you don't want to start leaning on it. But that's I've seen that happen, for sure.
Fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. So, but my point that I was going to talk about too was just that like I moved away from marijuana for that reason, and like it was starting to get a little too potent and a little too like and obviously I noticed that my habits, would change dramatically when I was smoking marijuana as compared to not. You were saying earlier you'd fall asleep. I found that too. Like if I smoked all day, every day.
Yeah.
And then I would get super blazed by like 3 p.m. and then I'd have to like take a nap or something, or I'd be passed out. I'd be trying to work and stuff and I'd just fall asleep. And it was never a big deal because up to this point in my life, I was always just fucking around anyway, so I didn't really care, you know what I mean? I was like, fuck it, I just quit, whatever, I'm playing video games and stuff, and this shit makes it more fun. But then when I was like trying to be productive, and then I know that a lot of people are like, oh, weed does not make you again, it affects everybody differently. So some people, I do know some people who are the most ambitious, the hardest working people I know, and they smoke weed all the time. But for me personally, I was finding it was making me too tired, sleepy, I couldn't get through my work days and stuff, and so I had to but I wanted to talk about it from this idea of kind of what it does, but in a spiritual sense. Like there's a lot of yogis who've talked about this, and it's been used on both sides. Some people use it as like a spiritual enlightening tool. Even like they said, the first people to have it were shamans and people who were trying to heal people with the medicine and stuff like that. So, it's in that side. But then on the other side too, where people have experienced that it doesn't necessarily help you grow spiritually. This dude, I've been looking up to him. This is a very anecdotal evidence to all this stuff, so I'm not saying that these are all facts or anything. These are all other people's personal experiences and stuff, but I've had similar experiences, and so
it's just another way to look at it.
Another way to look at it. I wanted to share this. So I know this idea of this thing called a vibrational scale, right? And it's this idea that everything on our unit, this is actually a fact, that everything has a vibration, right? This table, our bodies, our cell, everything has a vibration, right? But we don't always attribute that to like substances, different types of music, different types of ideas, whatever. And so
different emotions,
and that's the big thing where they talk about here is like every emotion has a vibration. Well, marijuana has a vibration too. Alcohol, like all these things have vibrations. And so as I started to raise my vibration, and I even talked about as I started getting more productive, or I started getting into meditation and all this shit, I started realizing that the effect that marijuana was having on me back in the day, where it was helping me overcome, mine wasn't anxiety or depression or anything. Mine was I was discontent with the lifestyle that I was living, and marijuana helped me escape that. But then as I started to really get content, like I said, I really wanted to be doing what I was doing, all this stuff, then it was starting to drag me down. And so I found this dude explains kind of what I'm talking about pretty clearly.
I believe is our natural state of being. Now I want to show you this chart right here, just to show you the chart of consciousness that I share in many videos, because these are different calibrations on this. So you'll see at the bottom shame, fear, guilt, and then you'll see a powerful step is neutrality, when we learn how to observe our thoughts. That's what I started to do, was to observe my thoughts, and then my vibration began to raise above that. And then what happens is you get that to acceptance, willingness, acceptance, and then you'll see that of reasoning, love, joy, peace, enlightenment. Einstein calibrated at 499 because that's reasoning, that's the intellect. He took it as far as you could possibly go, and in order to get to love, he would have had to let go of that intellect. So that's reasoning. He was at 499. If you look at certain other things, they'll calibrate at a certain frequency. Now, alcohol calibrates at about 275. So you see 275 on the scale isn't necessarily high. And when people do it, they may feel relief if they're in the lower emotions, and then they drink, they may feel a little bit better. However, then you see that of acceptance. Now, weed calibrates at about 340 to 370, which is right at acceptance. Now, it's a funny thing, because when you smoke, what kind of state do you get in? You kind of accept the moment as it is. You're kind of like, oh, it's all good. You're more just in that state of allowing. Now, the thing is for a lot of people, maybe if you're in the lower states or you're feeling a certain way and you do it, you will get a pick-me-up. You will feel better. But the thing is when you raise your vibration to a higher state of consciousness, then you are above that. So when you do those things, it then brings you down. You may be at reasoning and then bringing yourself down to acceptance. Or you may be at acceptance and bringing yourself down to drinking. If you drink, it may bring you down even more to pride. It's funny because drinking is close to courage, but courage still has a little bit of pride in it. But why do they call it liquid courage? You see? So it's kind of an interesting idea. But as you look at the scale right here, what you'll notice is there's different calibrations. Now, when you raise your vibration by observing your thoughts, not attaching to the ego, in reasoning, it's about understanding that you realize your beliefs create your reality. You start to let go of all of the things that anything that has power over you. And you start to realize things, and you start to relate to life in a different way.
He goes on the tangent here, but and I would say the same thing too, right? Like people often frame this marijuana, alcohol, any drug conversation in the context of good and bad, right? Like, it's a good thing to not smoke or to smoke, or it's a bad thing, right? We're always trying to perpetuate that it's nuance. You know, for different people, it's going to do different things depending on your chemistry, your mindset, where you're at, all this stuff. But I thought that this was very interesting, you know, because like I used to always say that marijuana, and then even the Cat Williams joke, is the fuck it drug, right? Like, it makes you just be like, yo, fuck it.
All.
Yeah, fuck it. Like, you know, I'm chilling, dog. Like, and that was what was killing me. I was very ambitious, but then I would smoke and it'd be like, well, fuck it, dog. You know, I chill today. It's like, whatever. You know what I'm saying? We don't need to get it out here. But then I really did want to get it. And then, like,
guys, I'm being honest here. I really did want to get it.
You're like, smoking, like, but I really do want to get it.
Oh yeah, and I was like, fuck it, you know, fuck it. And but the way that they explained this, it just seemed, like I said, I know that this is very woo woo and it's not scientific in any way, shape, or form. But you know, he's all like, Einstein calibrated at 499, and I'm like,
he's dead.
How do we know this? Like, what is this? He said muscle test. I don't even know what that was. But when you just look at it as information I mean, that is what weed does to you. It does bring you to a level of acceptance, right? And I could see how if you are somebody who's suffering from depression or something like that, or anxiety, right? Like, it's going to bring you up to acceptance, and therefore you would feel good. It feels like it's this mood enhancement and stuff. But if you're vibrating a lot higher than that and I smoke, then it kind of brings you down. And then that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. I love when Sadhguru is someone that we've both listened to that talks a lot about weed and smoking and stuff like that. And he's had a couple of really funny one-liners that I really like about the topic. But one of the ones that actually sat with me, which I thought was more profound the more I heard him say it, was he would say, you know, I don't understand why people will smoke weed or do any of these drugs and then say that they're high. Because, like, you know, your faculties actually are lowered. And he was like, you know, if you are on a plane and the pilot comes out and he says, oh, like, I just smoked or whatever, do you want to fly in that plane? And so he was like, you know, some people are like, whatever, you know, fly the plane. And he's like, you know, some people will tell me like, oh, well, the planes fly themselves anyways. He was like, okay, well then what if you had to have serious life-threatening surgery? Would you want your doctor to be like stoned out of his mind when he goes in to do your surgery? And like when he said it like that, I was like, yeah, I guess I really wouldn't, because I mean, I know that I've done some silly things and I'm more prone to fuck up when I was stoned, you know? And so I'm like, maybe I'd probably want my doctor to be like as focused as possible. And that's the thing, is that you don't know how it's going to affect your doctor, so I'd rather him just not do it.
Based on our stories, we've all operated like multi-ton machines speeding down highways while under the influence of marijuana. 100%. It's like, yeah, I definitely don't want my surgeon doing it.
Like, I'll tell you this, and like you said, and he even said, Guru talks about that in his little jokes, because I almost brought that to this too, but he's like, you know, some people might be okay with it. Like, so for me, right, like you driving high, like I've driven high my whole life. I get it. I'm not really that afraid of it, right? Not necessarily. But there's times I get afraid. I tell you what, if any of those pilots who flew that helicopter knew I was stoned, they would be fucking freaking out. You know what I mean?
They
like,
would not fly those helicopters.
Same thing to me too. If like I get on a plane, just if you gave me a choice, now I'm not saying this man can't operate the plane while he's high. I'm not saying that it's not possible. But if you're like, would you like a sober pilot today, or would you like this?
I would choose a sober pilot.
The 5 black backwoods deep pilot. I'm like, I'm going with the sober pilot, dog. You know
if I get a choice.
So, you know, I think that's what I learned too. And then so still same too, I'm on this sober kick right now. I'm doing this challenge where I'm just doing 60 days, no smoking and all that stuff. And I don't know if I'm gonna keep up with it, you know. I don't know. For me, the problem that I've had with marijuana is not what it does to me. It's the habit, right? It's like we even said, you were like, I can't be a good proponent for the medicinal side of it, right? Like that's where I'm at with it too. It's like I never used it in a way that was medicinal or
like consciously,
you know, right? I was
like wake and bake, like
just the habit, and I don't want to fall back into this habit of just smoking all the time. And I found that it just creeps that way all the time. Like every time I try to smoke a little bit and just like chill, like maybe at night or just do it every now and then, I end up just getting back to blazing all day. And I'm just, you know, for me, it's just I'm not there with it right now. So that's gonna be interesting to find out how I navigate it on the other side of this. But
join me for a year.
I already did with the alcohol, you know, which has been beneficial. Because dude, I'll tell you this, alcohol, again, like he was talking about, it resonates around whatever, courage, and you can see that. Like when you get drunk, you feel anger, pride, and courage. That's 9 times out of 10 when I see people express one of those. If not, they're in that willingness. It's right. Willingness is at 310.
You lower your inhibitions, baby.
You know what I'm saying? Now it's just like, yo, I'm into it. Let's do whatever, right? You know, fuck it. So I get what they're saying in these types of vibrations and stuff. And so I wanted to bring that. Every time I get to talking about marijuana, I always want to present this information right here because, like I said, it was very eye-opening to me in my ideas of like how I use the substance, because before any of this, I was that guy. I just run up in there and it'd be like, it was just about getting high. Like I wanted to get as high as I possibly could, you know, and there was no like, even when we talked about today, it was like, this shit could cause cancer. You know, I never thought about that. To me, I had ideas implanted in my head that you could not get cancer. They were like, no, that cigarettes, that'll give you cancer. And then I remember buying some weed from the store, and then they were like, warning, could cause cancer. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm like, why are they putting cancer warnings on my joints?
Well, one thing that I've noticed from living in California is that it appears that anything and everything could give you cancer.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they have those prop whatever number on everything. You walk into a bakery and it's like, things in this bakery are been known to cause cancer. And I'm like, so, and it's like everywhere. It's like at Walmart, it's at everything. It's like that warning's on everything in California. And it's like, so it just sounds like cancer is just something that kind of happens to some people for a myriad of different reasons.
Yeah, I was going to say the big joke is anything can fucking give you cancer.
Well, I've really come to the, I've honestly come to the conclusion that given enough time, everyone would get cancer. And the only reason I say that is because we have cancerous cells in our bodies right now. Every living person has cancer cells in them. The only thing is that your body tends to take care of them in a promptly manner with your immune system. And the cancer cells are spread out so that I know that when cancer cells start to group together and forming tumors and stuff like that, like that's when they start becoming really, really bad because they are hyperactive cells. Like there's cells that are just naturally occurring in your body. It's not like, and like radiation can increase the amount of cancer cells that develop in your body, but they just naturally develop and then your body takes care of them. In the same way that you naturally come into contact with bad bacteria or viruses when you're out in the world, and your body for the most part just takes care of them. You don't even get sick. But then sometimes you get like a high dosage of it. You know, somebody sneezes right into your drink or something, you don't notice, and then you get a big dose of those germs and your body doesn't have enough time, or it's something that it hasn't come into contact with before, and so it doesn't have the mechanisms to stop it. And then once that happens, your inflammation goes up, and that's, I mean, again, the symptoms that you feel, just as an anecdote, the symptoms that you feel, or a tangent, I guess, are not caused by the bacteria. That's actually your body trying to kill the bacteria. So when you have a fever or when you have swelling, that's your body trying to get rid of those things. And so it's like I stopped putting ice on bruises and shit like that. Like when I swell up or I have bruises or whatever, I don't put ice on it anymore because it's like your body is swelling to contain the thing that's causing you the injury or whatever. And so like to go against it and be like, I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna put ice on this, and I don't want swelling. And it's like, it does that for a reason. It's not just like it's not the disease or the bacteria that's causing that. It's your body's responses to it.
That's interesting. But then how come doctors are always trying to keep the swelling down?
Because they want you to do your research. That's what I want you guys to do too. Because I don't know enough about it to make a claim. Because like you said,
well, I've just over the last few years, I'm starting to humble myself to the idea that perhaps we don't know as much as we think we know, and that we're actually out here sabotaging ourselves. Like I feel like the entire billion-year process that evolution has designed our bodies within knows way more about how it should work than I do, than doctors do, than anybody alive does. Like I feel like tapping into that I guess you could call it like primal knowledge or whatever. Like I feel like if my body does swelling when it has bruises and stuff like that, and I mean, and it's a case-in-case basis, but I've leaning more towards that side where I'm like, it's probably that way for a reason.
Well, like we already pointed out a little bit too with medicines and all that types of stuff, they tend to treat symptoms, right? It's like you take a Tylenol, it doesn't fix your headache, right? It just dulls the pain of your headache. And I think that's where this stuff comes from. I don't know, like I said, I definitely don't know about swelling and that stuff, and I second the idea of you should research everything that we talk about on this podcast for yourself, make your own decisions and your own conclusions. But I think that, often a lot of medicine comes from the about that people don't want to deal with the symptoms of the whatever it is that they're suffering from because they're discomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have the swelling or the pain or
Dr. Jordan Peterson needed his
benzodiazepines
because that, I'll tell you what, that leg shaking.
Leg
shaking came from him stopping the benzodiazepines. And actually, I just listened to his interview from the New York Times. They recorded the full thing and it was unedited because it actually ended up being a written interview, and obviously the woman couldn't put everything that they talked about in there because it was like an hour and a half long. But in that interview, come to find out, some sort of reaction that he had with a combination of the benzodiazepines and some sort of chemical in an apple cider thing that somebody had cooked for them was actually the cause of it, according to the people that they talked to. So it's like, again, it's just much more complicated than it, like
akathisia or whatever that was.
Yeah,
I think he going through great lengths to try and to explain his addiction to goddamn Xanax. Like that's what I think he be using these words. I had akathisia. I was on benzodiazepines. I'm like, bro, just call it what it was.
The spiced
you was
apple
addicted
cider.
to Xanax, dog. Like it's okay. It happens to the best of us, dog.
But the apple dumplings, I'm telling you,
it was a combination of apple cider with the benzo. Like, bro, just chill on it. You got addicted. Maybe you didn't mean to do it on purpose, but I've been shaking my finger lately at Jordan Peterson. Not at the fact that he got addicted to benzos. Like I think that happens to people all the time, but his like trying to say it was some apple cider reaction. I don't know. I'm no doctor.
I mean, he's not saying that. He said that his doctor said that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that.
Well, I guess he's saying that his doctor said that.
Doctors
I
tell
didn't
you
talk
to
his doctor.
Doctors tell you to put ice on swelling.
I mean, they're the ones that gave him the benzodiazepines.
I'm not telling you that he's correct either. All I'm saying is that, once again, I feel like it's probably more complicated than whatever we think. It's probably more complicated than just the apple cider chemicals and the benzodiazepines. Like, it probably had a lot to do with the fact that his wife just found out that she had terminal cancer and that his daughter just had surgery where she was almost going to lose her leg, and like that's just real stressful. Like maybe the stress had a lot more to do with it than the benzos are. I just think that I've stopped being so satisfied with a surface level understanding of things and just always being like, okay, well, let me see if I can go a layer deeper than that. Let me see if I can go a layer deeper than that. Like, let me see if it's like, maybe it is that he just got addicted, but let me see, like, why would he get addicted? Like, what was happening in his life that would make him do that? Or what is happening in your body that makes weed suppress sleep? Like, I wasn't satisfied with the idea that weed just suppresses your sleep or weed suppresses your dreams. I was like, well, why does it do that? Like, what's happening there?
But I would argue that you didn't find out anything more complex. Like you found a complex explanation for the simple idea that weed suppresses your sleep. And you were like, yeah, well, it knocks you from stage 1 to stage 2 quicker, which is just a very complex explanation of the fact that weed dulls your sleep. So I mean,
I guess that's a different interpretation, because really what it found out for me was that it enhances certain levels of sleep and then it dulls other levels of sleep, which is actually not the same as saying it suppresses sleep. But and that's again what I'm saying is that I'm maybe it's not so much that I'm not looking to make conclusions about things, but just gather more information.
Yeah, which I get that too. I get that too, 100%. I like to gather information to make my conclusions because I live on the conclusions that I make. But I would highly encourage, because that's one thing I say about this with the marijuana conversation. Like I said, to me, it's not a good or a bad thing. I would be remiss if we walked away from this conversation without talking about the legalization aspect of it and just like the criminality aspect of it. Because that's one thing I have come to a conclusion about, right? Is that like, I don't know if marijuana is a good or a bad thing for you, or that you should or should not be smoking it or eating it or whatever. But the idea that you should go to jail, or that you should have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to the government, or that we should have to pay billions and billions in taxes to fight against it, I think has been really clownish.
I would love to hit my blurb. I think it's the very first blurb under Mezz Mezro here. It talks about Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and 2 other Democratic senators said Monday that they will push to pass this year sweeping legislation that would end the federal prohibition on marijuana, which has been legalized to some degree by many states.
Fire.
Every initiative that involved the decriminalization or legalization of marijuana on the ballot in 2020 passed.
Fire.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so we're coming to it.
Also, I will say that he's actually the minority leader now.
this
Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the minority leader.
Is he? I thought he was the majority leader now.
Is he?
Yes, because they won.
Democrats or
Democrats.
Oh, I'm thinking about Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, this is Chuck Schumer. This is the Senate,
other guy.
Senate majority leader on the
other
Democratic
old white
side.
dude.
Talking about the reform, they said it would also provide restorative justice for people who have been convicted of pot-related crimes. And they also said that they will release a unified discussion draft or comprehensive reform early this year. So this is all happening in the first 2 months of 2020 in the new Biden administration. It looks like, and this is just appearances, but it looks like they're trying to actually move forward at a federal level on decriminalizing this substance.
Yeah, which is fire to me. I mean, like I said, I just think that, okay, like, look, if you, this is the point that I'll stand on with this whole thing, right? If it's criminal, then alcohol has to be criminal. But the idea that alcohol gets by and is allowed, right, and it was able to wiggle itself out of there, but then marijuana still has to get lumped up in there, to me is very strange. It just seems it's laughable.
I mean, the amount of people that die every year just straight from alcohol consumption is I don't even know how many it is, because there's been, like, I was gonna say it's X amount of times more than weed, but nobody's ever died just from weed consumption.
Mm-hmm. So we don't even know. Yeah, but
it's like you don't even know how many people died.
Another great point that speaks to that. You're talking about the side effects and things like that. Prohibition of alcohol caused the mafia.
Yeah.
Prohibition on marijuana has led to cartels running rampant. Now, it's not to say that cocaine and some of the other things are trafficked through these cartels.
I mean, they're going to figure something.
But marijuana is a major source of income for these people.
Huge.
So if it's causing these criminal elements to thrive, and we get rid of prohibition, and then the mafia still exists, but they're not slinging rum, I mean, this is definitely a way to help with the cartel situation. I think that decriminalization goes a long way in helping prevent some of the crime.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
And the mafia was able to continue its power only because it was able to find other ways to get in bed with the government through construction, through unions and stuff like that. Like,
through the city.
Once all of those, like, ways of them getting into the actual institutions of society were pulled away from them, I mean, like, the mafia is still around. It's not like it's gone. There's still godfathers and shit out there, but you don't hear about them because they're not as powerful. Like, they just can't. Yeah, they just don't have as much influence over society anymore. In the same way that you're saying that the cartels might not, if we stop allowing them to make all their money from their biggest cash crop.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, because, like, look, you're right. The black market's always going to exist and this and that, but there's a such thing as market cap, right? Like, and certain industries thrive or die because there's a high supply or a high demand of certain things, right? There's an obvious high demand for marijuana right now. I would argue higher than cocaine or meth or anything.
Getting bigger.
You know what I'm saying? Any of that stuff.
Only getting bigger, baby.
And so the more things you can pull from the black market and pull them into your legal society, or you can tax them if you want to and make you a little guapage too, and that we can save ourselves some money in our own pockets from paying for these people to live in prisons and all this other shit that comes along with that. It does decrease that. Like, cartels will go out of business just by there being one less product for them to be able to push. It just drops the market cap of whatever illegal substances there are to sell out there. So, I don't know how far you take it, because there's a lot of stronger arguments to be made for all of these other chemicals and things that we've created over time. But I just always seen marijuana, especially with it being a plant. I mean, it's, to me, in my view of things, the safest of all of these fucking drugs. The safest of all intoxicants out there. Maybe not so much now when we're getting the, meth crystal weed. But I'm just saying, like, to me, it seemed like it was the most natural, the most safe, intoxicant, or whatever you want to use it for, mind-altering substance. It counts for the least amount of deaths,
but it's put millions of people in prison.
Let's just take an anecdotal comparison. Musicians that do cocaine regularly tend to not have long careers.
Fact.
Snoop Dogg has smoked weed since before he was making music, and he is still popping and still smoking weed, and he's probably in better health than he's ever been in.
Yeah, heroin also makes him die pretty young too.
Yeah, I mean, Jimi Hendrix died way before he should have.
Yeah, facts.
Same with Kurt Cobain and some of these other guys that were into the heroin thing.
Yeah, Mezro's still doing it.
Yeah, Mezro's still blowing. He died in 1972, by the way. But yeah, you make a fair point there back about like, you know, the harder drugs, as we consider them, like cocaine and heroin, tend to give you less of a career than the pot.
Yeah.
Pot.
I mean, just the longevity.
You ever suck dick for weed?
This man in here over some marijuana. Yeah. Shout out Half Baked, one of my favorite movies growing up.
So good. Literally, our nickname came from that movie.
Yes, that's true. Me and Sherrod used to be known colloquially as a duo as Abba Zabba. Yeah. Because when I first met him and when he came to Nomad Troop, everyone else had these preconceived notions about him being an egotistical asshole. And I was his friend because I didn't have any preconceived notions. I just met Rod and was like,
Seems
you're
cool
funny. You seem cool. You want to be my biracial hetero life mate?
Yeah.
Turns out he did.
But it's a joke on the play of the line where he pulls out that Abba Zabba bar and he's like, Abba Zabba, you're my only friend.
Yeah, it all comes from that one line.
That's what we know about Abba Zabba. I tell him
Bring the thread back to where it hit the fabric, baby.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting. I'm interested to see how it continues to grow in a society like, you know, illegal or illegal or whatever. It's, to me, I'm keeping my eye on how we do it, because, you know, sugar was a good thing. We were just talking about this earlier today in the kitchen. You know, sugar, raw cane sugar. I was talking about this. I was like, man, back in 1736, how much sugar you think you could get? I was like, you know what I mean? Like, if you were able to bust down a whole field of reed, which you probably, like sugar cane, which you probably didn't have the time for. I mean, at best, you could get a hands on maybe 2 to 5 grams of sugar. Yeah.
Look, in the 1700s,
I'm gonna have to tell you right now that, and this is coming from, like, I'm reading this, listening to this pirate book, like 1736. They were shipping sugar in barrels all over the goddamn planet. So like, you could literally steal entire ships full of sugar.
Okay, before agriculture came about.
But people weren't going to the store and getting Heinz ketchup in the 1700s that was full of sugar.
45
like they were just smushing up some
it
tomatoes.
In everything.
That's the point he's making.
Yeah, I understand the point he's making.
That's the point I'm making. I just, you know, it's cool. Marijuana is great. Started off awesome. I don't know if 145% THC is necessarily a good thing.
It just grows like some giant joint out of the ground full of weed
just
already.
Crystals, you know, like, I don't know if that's necessarily good, but I'm excited to see.
Somebody gonna die from it.
I think
someone gonna die from it. It's gonna happen.
Eventually,
It's gonna happen.
I think, this happens with everything. I mean, humans seem to do this no matter what. We take things too far, and then everybody else sees what happens to those people, and they're like, maybe we should draw back on that a little bit. And I think that we're seeing that with alcohol. I mean, I think unfortunately, the pandemic has actually increased the rates of alcoholism and stuff like that. But before then, we were seeing a really like steady drop in the consumption rates of alcoholism and stuff like that. But you know, it'll be one of those things where we have to do it so much because for some reason we seem to be a species that's always like more is better, more is more, like keep getting more and more. So like if you like it
faster,
at a little
stronger,
level, then
better,
you'll
harder.
love it at more. So you know what I mean? So like we'll just continue to do that in a process, and I think it's gonna be like a peaks and valleys thing. Like we'll go up into we're on our way up to the peak of marijuana, and at some point something will happen, and everybody will be like, I don't know if we should be doing it all that much, and then we might dip all the way back down into like we should legalize it again, and then eventually it'll level out somewhere within the next 100 years, and then it'll be like COVID-19. It's gonna be like this thing that ramps up really quickly at first, and then it kind of drops down, and we're all like, no, we can't do it, and then you know eventually we'll just have to live with it.
Big facts, dude. Well, I mean, I'm good on that, man. You know, like I said, I can't wait to light one up again when I get off my challenge, but we'll see how often.
I'll be here waiting for you. It's like the end of Half Baked. You ever seen the end of Half Baked where he's talking to the joint and there's a woman inside the weed and she's like, I've always loved you, baby, or something. All right, real quick, hold on.
The better scene is at the end of Friday when he's like, I'm off this shit, man. I'm going to rehab, and he hangs up the phone. You know, I was just bullshitting.
So funny. I'm pretty sure we'll revisit this conversation again in the future because there's still a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, I was going to say we could go for a few more hours.
Yeah, absolutely. But in the meantime, you know, we'll see you again for the next episode, and we appreciate your time, guys. Peace.